Ready, let's go. How's everybody doing tonight? Yo, yo, let's go. What's up, everyone? Let's get it going. Let's get it off and popping. How we doing? How we doing, y'all? Good to see y'all tonight. We got a pretty deep one tonight. Not purely literary. We're going to talk about the movies too. We're getting tonight. We're doing H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau and The War of the Worlds and Phantasms in a Dead City is what I call this. Here's the mic good. Is the mic good? There we good. Hopefully the mic's good. Of course, all the settings reset, but that's the way it goes. So, yeah, I hope everyone's doing okay tonight. Busy day, busy week. So I'm trying to get all my materials here together. So, what I've got for you tonight is we're going to do a deep dive into H.G. Wells' Dr. Moreau, which I've been talking about for a while now, uh, and and then the War of the Worlds, which we're finally getting to. And I thought I would just kind of throw them both into one stream here. And of course, we're going to talk about little Tom Coom. We're going to do the film, the Spielberg film, War of the Worlds, and of course, The Island of Dr. Moreau with Val killing it, and Marlon Brando. Yes. You come to me on the day of my daughter's wedding, and you ask me this favor. So we're going to be doing Marlon Brando. And of course, that's not really the Brando of this film. But this one is an unusual film for Brando for one simple reason, and that is that it is of course, a South Pacific setting. And Brando famously lived in, I think, on the island of Tahiti for a long time. And of course, he had some tragic events with his family involving his daughter from there. But uh, you know, this is a '90s film, and it's really not a great film. But it's there's a whole documentary about it, of course, about the making of the film and how they got a new director. They got John Frankenheimer to take over as director, and we've covered Frankenheimer because we did a Ronin analysis. If you guys remember that, I did that a little while back. Great film. And so, but anyway, we're going to start off by talking about the books, the literature, and what's interesting. I'll just say this right off the bat with H.G. Wells. So we could go into a discussion of his life because, of course, his life is there's a lot going on with H.G. Wells in terms of Fabian technocracy, his Anglo American outlook, his sort of interactions with these elites, and of course, we could spend a long time on that. I would say, however, the best thing to do as far as looking into the life of Wells and how he affected others in that way would be, of course, to look at the Globalist book series. Look at what Jay has done with H.G. Wells. He's done a lot of work discussing H.G. Wells's work, but we're going to look at his fiction and these two science fiction works and see how they sort of embody those things that we know about H.G. Wells. Now, usually with literary streams, of course, what I usually say is that I prefer not to look into the personal life too much of the writer and the author in order to find, to glean some sort of understanding of the meaning of their work because of what I've said so many times about how the writer and the speaker there's a gulf between those two, and also how the great works in the canon. We know very little about the life of the writer. I mean, look at Shakespeare. But I think it's important to discuss a few things in relation to that. And with that in mind, I'm going to be going over sort of in and out of these two papers right here. One is just basically a brief little paper, an interview with Harold Bloom, Bloom's Giant Forms. It's actually a discussion of Harold Bloom in terms of cosmology and what he thought about. He mentions H.G. Wells and Jules Verne in this little talk, and I think it's very small, but it's pretty revelatory, and I tend to agree with them on this, which I'll get to. We've done Verne, by the way. We did Under the Sea, right? We did 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. We did that, of course, in the summertime in relation to the the event that happened involving the Titanic. Uh, what would you call that? The I guess disaster that happened with the weird elite tourism in the ocean. Ocean Gate this past summer. We talked about Vern. I'll say right off the bat this. I'm a little not anxious about covering H.G. Wells, but I'm a little bit. I have a different, kind of mentality going into a discussion about him because, to be honest, TBH, I'm the writers that I cover, writers in the canon. I'm so familiar with them that it's sort of easy to do. But H.G. Wells, I find myself at a loss a lot of times when reading him because of a few things, and this sort of echoes what Bloom says in this interview that basically what he says at one point in this interview with this guy he's talking to Mark Edmondson. don't know when this is from, but it's sort of an overview of the importance of Harold Bloom's criticism, and within that, he mentions that the importance of reading, and Bloom is all about, of course, Milton and Melville and the massive sort of poetry of even of great prose works, right? That they take on something bigger. They transcend sort of time, and that's sort of what we've talked about. The entire breadth of this channel. But he mentions H.G. Wells and Jules Verne because he says in his old age, because this was given like I think a couple years before he passed away. He said that he didn't think he would ever return to read H.G. Wells or Jules Verne because what does he say? He's talking about going back to the sort of his version of Desert Island books, and he just basically, to paraphrase, he mentions he says Orwell acutely criticized H.G. Wells for being too sane to understand the modern world. And this is about Harold Bloom. From Bloom's point of view, most academic critics of poetry are of far too accommodated a disposition, too sane to understand that a potent text is always an act of will to power. That's sort of Nietzschean. That's this guy, not Bloom, saying that. Bloom's criticism aims to resist the process by which poetry is absorbed into various forms of cultural consensus. The idea that anger and ambition of an emphatically personal sort motivate real artistic achievement is meant to contend against. Sorry, I wrote all over this. Against Arnold's assimilation of sublime art to the categories of sweetness and light, as well as against the Marxist tendency to read poetry in terms that take only passing account of the individual will. In other words, what it's saying is that for Harold Bloom, literature and especially poetry is much more sublime in its nature. It's concerned with beauty in a way that the ordinary, verbiage of the common man can't. They want to reach to. That's why there are poets. This is one thing that poetry does, right? The best words in the best order, but with like the sort of Marxist undertones and now overtones and sort of a through line through academia. That's obviously reactionary against those sorts of things because we hear this like collective and collectivism, collectivization, and this writer says that those are sort of acts against the individual will of the poet and his purpose to create, right? If that makes sense. Okay, so let me just bring this down to sort of simple terms. Bloom basically says that he wouldn't return to Wells to rereading, The War of the Worlds or Island of Dr. Moreau or The Time Machine because you read them in your youth and then they are so absorbed into culture that the entire story, and even when you go back to the language in the text, it doesn't strike the sublime tone that it did perhaps in your youth, and it's over. Okay, so you've read it once, and that's all you need to do. Does that make sense? And I kind of agree with him. In that. Not to say that it's not important to study these novels or reread them for other purposes, but just in a purely almost like in the vein of just enjoying literature, right? I also can't see myself going back and rereading these. I just can't. War of the Worlds is again so ingrained. Everyone knows the story. And that's not to say it's bad. But the going back and rereading the text this week or last week, I was struck by some of the violence of the language. I mean, it's you can see why it is a popular book. You can see why it's a good book. It's an elevated book. But there's something missing for me, if that makes sense. It's not. It doesn't. It's like, you see why I struggle with this. Okay, when I read, for instance, Cormac McCarthy or like Herman Melville, right? They can be dark writers and heavily Gnostic, but they are powerful in the sense that I get like life. There's energy. There's life. It inspires me to to seek, to ask questions, to do all the things that you would do with literature. with H.G. Wells, I go, okay, well, I don't know if this guy like overtly uh, hates humanity, right? But it seems so. Does that make sense? Tell me what you think in the chat about this. Am I just babbling, or it's just it makes me uneasy. Um, and with that in mind, I'm also going to be going over. I'm sorry for the long introduction here. I'm also going to be going over this paper from Dr. Moreau to Dr. Mengele, the biological sublime, which I found so fascinating that I just happened to come upon it, and I think it's important to dive into it. So let me start off by talking about the island of Dr. Moreau. Okay, have you guys read this? Has anybody read this? I'm sure people, if you haven't read it, then you've read excerpts or you've seen the film or you at least know the story. So what the novel is about is we get a guy who is lost at sea, and he finds himself rescued, and then he basically goes to a desert island. It's cool because it's a desert island story, and we've covered plenty of those, right? We've done Lord of the Flies, we've done Foe, right? Remember we covered Foe? That's one of my sort of not forgotten texts, but streams. But that was a retelling of Robinson Crusoe, right? By Coetzee, J.M. Coetzee, who won the Nobel Prize, the South African. Desert island story, right? Desert island book, and I think especially younger fellas, when you're younger, you love those stories. I still like those stories. I imagine what I would do on the desert island, how I would survive, right? Would I be a Tom Hanks and wait for the packages to arrive, right? Would I try to make a boat? Would I explore the island? Would I look at my little locket and then worship the volleyball demon face? um, that's a good movie, by the way. Um, Castaway. What do you guys think of that movie, the Tom Hanks movie? I enjoyed that movie because, again, I imagine what I would be doing, but I like the movie because I like the fact that it's like the music is spare and it takes so long for the music to come into the movie, and when it does, it's not it's not like the Hans Zimmer scores that we've talked about, right? It has an impact. But yeah, I like that movie. I think it's good. Fire! Look what I have made, right? But yeah. So Moreau is also a kind of a desert island book. But what happens is that the main character realizes that he has gone from the frying pan into the flames, the total flames, the fire of vivisection, and just this total hellscape. It's pretty frightening and disturbing. And uh, it's bizarre to me that even making the films that they have of this book, that there are still some sort of weird characters that are too much to even put on film, even now. There's this one like worm character that like really was freaky. But of course, we read this and we go, oh yeah, human animal pig chimeras gestating on U.S. research farms under the botany department. And have you ever seen a splice between a rhesus monkey and an arachnid, right? Spider guts, which by the way, um, I've mentioned many times, because of course it comes from Papa over there. But I saw an article this week that was talking about a mainstream article, and it was saying that that Kevlar was not as strong as this particular type of silk, and that they were using, they were splicing the thing to make it, and that they were making body armor out of it. So spider guts, right? A splice between a rhesus monkey and an arachnid. Spider guts. Oh, just got chills, folks. I'm coming from my tour bus. I'm also trying to get a soundboard, by the way, because I've got so many hot clips lined up. I've got so many hot clips lined up that I want to be able to do a soundboard here, right? I mean, like for example,
which, to quote Reddit, is a hungry dungry sandwich in my tummy wummy. With Cheetos on top, please. Ding!
All right, so Some of you can probably recognize that like right away, right off the bat. But I'll just tell this before I get into my deep analysis of the island of Dr. Moreau, right? And if you're watching this later and you don't want to be annoyed by the little tangent here, well, just fast forward about 3 minutes, I guess. So I was driving yesterday, and Sam's live stream came on. And this was the intro. Did you guys anybody see it yesterday? This was the intro to the live stream, and it just had the loading screen on, right? It was, I guess, Elder Scrolls music or whatever. And but the fellas back there were chatting, and when he said, somebody said, "What about those sandwiches?" Right? What about those sandwiches? We're gonna do anything? I'm talking about Sam. Y'all know Sam. And he said, "Oh, not that one. That one's Point Break." And he said,
Which, to quote Reddit, is a hungry dungry sandwich in my tummy wummy. With Cheetos on top, please. Ding!
when I heard that, they had blocked off the road for road work, and there was a detour, and I had to slam on the brakes. I almost went right off like a movie. I almost fell out of the car. I laughed so hard at that. And then shouts out, by the way, big shouts out. I got to give a shout out to there's Papa, and then there's Big Papa, there's BPF. Did you guys listen? I watched the late night stream the other night, the TT invasion, and honestly, like, I could not turn it off. It was I just couldn't turn it off. And at one point, Andy, our friend Andy,
Get
said,
back to work, yeah? Get back to work.
he was wearing it. So shouts out to Andy. Shouts out to BPF, our friend over at the Crucible, because this was late night, and I could not turn it off. It was late night. There's a big crowd there. If you guys saw it, some of y'all were in there, and it was Halloween night. He was wearing a top hat, and when he said that line, it's the little things that I find funny. It's the little bits, right? It's the little character bits. And that one was so funny to me because it's like 4 seconds long, and it was just, I could picture him being that character. Get back to work, yeah? Get back to work. Need to fulfill the orders. All right. So speaking of that character, Mr. Peanut, Monopoly, top hat wearing, guy, right? 120 years ago. That's the era that we're talking about, sort of, with H.G. Wells and the Island of Dr. Moreau. Okay, so let's sort of dive into it here and what happens. By the way, please smash that like, you guys. Give me a like and share. We had a great stream last week, right? With Jay and Jamie. That was a lot of fun. We did a long, deep dive into those four films, and now they're off to Italia. They're over there, and all of us are trying to hold it down. Shouts out to DPH too. If you guys want me and DPH, David Patrick Harry, Church of the Eternal Logos, to do a film analysis of the movie Hereditary, which was discussed in that last stream, let him know, because I would love to have him over here, because I've been there, a bunch of times, right? And we need to have our friend over here on the stream. So let him know, please. All right. So the island of Dr. Moreau. So the character goes to the island, and he's rescued by this doctor, who in the film is Val Kilmer, of course. And he's been floating, he's been on the sea for a long time, sort of floating in the cauldron of the Pacific, right? And I want to get to this particular part. He says in this one part on page 17, he says, I looked out at the darkling sea. It's a great word. Darkling sea, not darking, not dark, darkling, where in the dimness of his little island was hidden. This man, it seemed to me, had come out of an immensity merely to save my life. Tomorrow, he would drop over the side and vanish again out of my existence. Even had it been under commonplace circumstances, it would have made me a trifle thoughtful. But in the first place was the singularity of an educated man living on this unknown little island, and coupled with that, the extraordinary nature of his luggage. I found myself repeating the captain's question, right? What did he want with the beasts? Why, too, had he pretended they were not his when I'd remarked about them at first? Then again, in the in his personal attendant, there was a bizarre quality that had impressed me profoundly. These circumstances threw a haze of mystery around the man. They laid hold of my imagination and lumbered my tongue. Towards midnight, our talk of London died away, and we stood side by side, leaning over the bulwarks and staring dreamily over the silent, starlit sea, each pursuing his own thoughts. It was the atmosphere for sentiment. And I began upon my gratitude. And he thanks him, right? And he says, "Thank no one. You had the need, and I the knowledge, and I injected and fed you much as I might have collected a specimen." So what we learn right away, this is not just a random excerpt. What we learn right away is that the guy who saves him, when the speaker wakes up, right? He sees that he's in his haze. He sort of sees that there's this doctor attending him, right? And it's surreal. It's dreamlike. He's already on the ocean, like on the waves of life. He thinks he's given up, right? He was burning to death, even though he's floating on the water. Water everywhere, not a drop to drink. And he's rescued by this guy, and then he sees what looks like a warped vision of a human. But then later, he's going to realize that, of course, this isn't a totally a human. I mean, he really does cross over the uncanny valley. That's what the book is partly about, right? It's about the recognition of humans visually and how that gets absorbed into your instincts and your sense of logic and your values. And it's difficult for this guy because he is away. He's in an other place, right? He's sort of in an inner zone between the the capital, right, between London and culture and civilization and where he's been, and now he's like in this other world. And we get a lot of literature like this because, of course, the exterior location, the setting is going to be a symbol for the sort of confusion and dissociation inside the interior, the fragmented psyche, right? And this is really important with H.G. Wells and then James Joyce, of course, who I'm going to cover later, because they convey this sense of this brokenness in every way, that is one of the major attributes of the modern era, right? The end of Queen Victoria, the end of imperial, Pax, the Pax Britannica, the civilization of the 19th century, right? And all of owning a quarter of the globe, right? I'm just saying on its surface, that the sense of order. And then we go into what should be more order in terms of the industrialism of the 20th century. But within that is this Blakean, what William Blake says, is the dark satanic mill, right? Which is how he describes the big smoke, the fog, London, and the height of its England in the height of its industry. Does that make sense? I know that's a lot, but just go with me here because I think you guys. I mean, obviously, you guys are on this little train too. You guys are on this little train, so you know the language of this, and I think it's important. I one of the things that I learned way back when I was prepping, when I was a young lad, I had an instructor who said, when you're young and you're writing like essays at school and stuff, and you're like, who do I write this for? Right? You get to a point where, let's say you're, in 10th grade or something, and you're writing a literary essay that you're required to write, and you're like, who do I write this for? And a lot of people think like, oh, I'm going to write this for like my little brother so he can understand this book. Well, we learned that that's maybe appropriate for like when you're much younger, but really your audience, when you do this sort of thing, even when you're talking about it, your audience should be yourself at your best, right? In other words, you're writing or you're speaking for somebody who is at your sort of general level, but on your best day, right? So that's why this is not meant for, the young people. It's not like, this isn't like teaching or something. This isn't for them. This is for you. This is for you guys and for me, right? Shouts out to everybody out there. Shouts out to the real John Connor, right? All the stars are here. Clogue, Lerman, Barfy Man, 761. All the stars are here. Shouts out to real John Connor out there who donated $15 before the stream even started. Hope he's doing well out there. Real John Connor. We love you. You guys should follow him on Instagram if he wants that. You know, hopefully he does. Now that I said it. And shouts out to everybody out there who's grabbing memberships. You know, honestly, like I'm totally a slow boy when it comes to this sort of stuff. Obviously, it takes me forever to do. And then I finally, like, I was doing it on my phone. I was looking at something in the studio thing. It was like, launch it. So I launched it. And we need to get a couple other levels in there. I don't know what to do with. I just kind of copied other people. I copied, how JD or how BPF does it. I copied Nick, Perfect Guy Life and their levels. I think I got one in there, Ace of Bazed. Right. I got Ace of Bazed, High IQ Book Enjoyer, PBR Street Gang, Almighty. This is PBR Street Gang. Over. Which is, if you know, you know. That's a deep Apocalypse Now reference. And shouts out to Jethro out there who's holding it down. And he suggested earlier, you guys should thank Jethro. I mean, you have no idea. Jethro is the number one. He's the original. He's the guy. He's the peak. Okay, and I can count on Jethro to give me an idea like he did earlier, which is we need to get gifts, and we need to get a Papa one. We need to get an AJ one. We need to get who else did you say earlier, Jethro? Mersh. We need to get a Mersh gift. Maybe we need to get like a Little Lord Sweet Creams JD gift, right? Probably ought to get a Lurie Nichols, right, as part of the membership. So we're gonna work on that. I have no idea how to do it, but shouts out to everybody out there grabbing a membership. And I know I'm getting way off track here, but hopefully this is important for the stream. I didn't know what to put down for the perks really yet. I put a couple things, but I think for the Ace of Bazed or whatever, the higher tier perks, we got to figure out a way to do like a riff tracks. We got to figure out a way to do movies because I don't know how people do movies and riff on them. I don't know the basic mechanics of how they're able to do it, right? Especially because of the Roppy Kite laws and all that stuff. I would love to be able to riff Cool as Ice, Vanilla Ice is Cool as Ice, which is that would be a good movie to do. Or Dario Argento's Phenomena. Toledo put me onto this movie. What was the name of the Eyes movie? Toledo with Tommy Lee Jones. Hi, my name's Tommy Lee Jones, and I'm in this horror movie about Faye Dunaway's eyes. She's a photographer who's kind of a Helmut Newton, classy nudes photographer in the 70s in New York. And I don't care. Is the movie. But it's also got, what's his face from Exorcist 3, who's always so good. And the last one, okay, here's the last one I'll mention. What I really want to cover sometime in the near future is I want to do Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. And more than just a movie analysis, I want to get the Mark Frost, the two Mark Frost books about Twin Peaks. And I'm not, super Twin Peaks fan. I know the stuff. Right. And I'm sure you guys, that's part of like the rabbit holes, right? You got to go into the Black Lodge and all this stuff and, learn about this stuff. But Brad Dorff, thank you. Yeah, we need to go back and look at Firewalk with Me because I rewatched the film, the David Lynch film, right, which has Chris Isaac and Kiefer Sutherland is kind of a young, like Alan Dulles looking character. It's got Bowie, it's got everybody in it. But Cheryl Lee, right, the main actress, is so good in this movie. I mean, it's a cult classic, right? And she's everyone remarks in a kind of an underground way on how good she is in the movie, but it's more than that. It really affected me how great she is in this movie. Like honestly, after a performance like she did in that movie, was it 1992? After that performance, I would expect her to never do another film. How could she? How could she act again after this movie? It's It's unreal. Have you guys seen that? Have you seen Firewalk with Me, the Twin Peaks film? Right? It's got the backwards talking Black Lodge scene. Also, if you can't figure out who the real bad guy is in the film, right? If you haven't seen it and you're watching it, surely you'll know right away who the actual bad guys. Because Bob's in it, right? Bob, the hobo demon. But surely you'll know right away what that means. I would think so. If not, that's okay. That's okay. We're all just human beings, right?
That's Bodhi. They call him the Bodhisattva. He's a real searcher.
What's he searching for?
The ride. The ultimate ride.
He's a modern savage, right? He's a searcher. Point Break. We got to do Point Break too. Okay, let's get back to Moreau. So, what I was saying is that he immediately gets rescued by this doctor, and of course, he is. While he's being rescued, he's injected with various things. You know, he constantly gives him morphine. You know, of course, this guy's I think the guy's a morphine addict. You know, alone on this island, he's the doctor in control of this place. But he, of course, right away uses the guy that he's rescued as a target of his experiment, right? And what else can I say about what this means, right? What else can I say other than that? This is so true. This is so absolutely true in every way, right? That the do no harm person that you expect to be objective in this sense is not so. That's all I can say really in that way. But you know what I mean, because obviously that's a spicy thing to say now. Yes. But it gets worse than that. It gets way worse. And so we haven't even met Moreau yet, right? In this part, he says, this damped my mood a little. At any rate, I began. He says, it's chances, I tell you, he interrupted, as everything is in a man's life. Only the asses won't see it. Why am I here now, an outcast from civilization, instead of being a happy man, enjoying all the pleasures of London, simply because 11 years ago I lost my head for 10 minutes on a foggy night? He stopped. Yes, said I. That's all. We relapsed into silence. Presently, he laughed. There's something in this starlight that loosens one's tongue. I'm an ass. And yet somehow I would like to tell you what he's doing right here. This is the beginning of the film. What he's telling him is it's kind of love bombing him in a way. This is gaslighting. He's saying, but it is true. The doctor, this isn't Dr. Moreau, this is the other guy. The doctor's saying, I'm here. I'm contracted to be the doctor for this, what we're going to find out is experimentation on this island. Because he committed something, some faux pas, right? Some crime, he crossed the bounds of normal civilization, right? Back in London. And that brought shame upon him. He lost face with his old boy people, and of course he had to go off to the bounds of civilization to work for this guy. And this is pretty common. This is a common thing. Now, it's weird because there's sort of a polar thing going on here. One is that there's one type of man, right, who is, the Eton educated guy, and then he's trained, and this is his role to go off and, be the governor of Singapore or whatever, right? Run the empire. But he has to have his managerial underlings, and the best one would be a disgraced guy from the same world who has been compromised through some sort of thing. And that's this guy, right? And what's also interesting is that, of course, they're on this island, which is going to function as what we've seen so many times. They're going to attempt to make it into a Neo Eden, right? They want to remake civilization entirely, right? Start over with a new people that we're going to find that Dr. Moreau sort of lords over. The people there worship him like a god. It must be tempting to act like that. He was a decent man. a good, decent man. And somewhere along the line, he went insane. It's Heart of Darkness, Apocalypse Now, very similar, and it's funny that these works, right, start to appear all at the same time, and I think that's because it's not just a reaction to the the long system of colonization, empire, and all that stuff. It's also that this is the result. This is the point. This is what's bound to happen when you send people overseas to like dominate, huge groups of people. And there's all sorts of metaphysical symbolism tied up into it. There's all this stuff. It's brutality mixed with, the gentleness of the open palm mixed with the rod, right, as it was. This sort of thing is bound to happen, right, where people start to either lose their minds or they're given the opportunity to do these things or they're instructed to do so, which I think is probably obviously the most sinister of these. At the end of this passage, he says, "It may seem a little thing to you, perhaps, but it came like a sudden blow to me. The only light near us was a lantern at the wheel." They're still on the boat here. "The creature's face was turned for one brief instant out of the dimness of the stern towards this illuminate confirm. And I saw that the eyes that glanced at me shone with a pale green light." Hello, hello, lady. How many times have we seen this in these books? How many times? And it's always British literature, right? Except for this occurred in American Psycho too, but it's always a green light, right? It's always this green vapor. I did not know then that a reddish luminosity, at least, is not uncommon in human eyes. Right? The thing came to me as stark inhumanity, that black figure with its eyes of fire struck down through till my adult thoughts and feelings, and for a moment the forgotten horrors of childhood came back to my mind. Then the effect passed as it had come. An uncouth black figure of a man, a figure of no particular import, hung over the taffrail against the starlight, and I found Montgomery was speaking to me. "I'm thinking of turning in then," said he, "if you've had enough of this," which is to say that the figure in black is obviously it's in dark shadow. Okay. But he can't really make out what it is, but it's beastly. But he still doesn't, trust his senses. But then he's met with this, commonplace language, right? "I'm going to bed." I answered him incongruously. We went below, and he wished me good night at the door of my cabin. That night, I had some very unpleasant dreams. The waning moon rose late. Its light struck a ghostly, faint white beam across my cabin and made an ominous shape on the planking of my bunk. Then the staghounds woke and began howling and baying, so that I dreamt fitfully and scarcely slept until the approach of dawn. Do you see how this is it's not, it starts to sound a bit Masonic, right? And in terms of the stages of the journey, even in one brief passage, even in an excerpt, right, from one chapter, we go from darkness to color, right, to certain keywords in a conversation, which sounds so unreal, right, that they sound like watchwords or something, and then we get to illumination, and then we get to darkness again. Does that make sense? It's not that, at least it's not overtly that, but we are being introduced into a rite of passage, which is strange because a rite of passage usually occurs with a younger character, but we see that the speaker here is being made young again, or at least they're attempting to make him young again because he's being introduced into this new world, right? He's, of course, he came from the water also. He was rescued from the ocean. So it's a kind of, there's baptismal symbolism, but he's being introduced into this new world, this new system, and they're going to slowly try and show him that this is the noble experiment and that he will be a part of it. What's unusual in this book is that the speaker has revulsion and feels that this is a repugnant activity from the start, and he says so. Now, it's not unusual that he would say so in the sense that he's a British establishment figure, and he's going to say the words, right, for the things that he finds repugnant. But it is unusual in that it seems antithetical. You would think knowing what we know about Wells, that he would make this likable. But he's it's much more clever than that. We go through his dreams, we go through who he is, his name, right? Let's see, Prendick. Let's see. Oh, he meets these guys, and they say, "Look here," I said. I began to the captain. Overboard, said the captain. This, he says, this ship ain't for beasts and cannibals and worse than beasts anymore. Overboard you go. The of course the people who have come across the island at all, who are natives of the general place, they avoid it. Just like in the Most Dangerous Game, remember? We did that short story again. Same sort of general time. Let's see. Let's move on to abruptly. The cruelty of this desertion became clear to me. I prayed aloud to God that He would let me die, says the speaker. And finally, we get introduced to Dr. Moreau in chapter 6, the evil-looking boatman. Okay, here we go. This is page 25 of this text. He says, let's see, he was a powerfully built man, as I've said, with a fine forehead and rather heavy features, but his eyes had that odd drooping of the skin above the lids that often comes with advancing years, and the fall of his heavy mouth at the corners gave him an expression of pugnacious resolution. That's Brando. That's Brando, like all the way. Mm. I've been here. My name is Dr. Moreau. I'm gonna get I got a little assistant over here who's gonna play piano. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna be in this film unless you get the little piano over here. The little piano over here. Put my lines. I want you to put my lines on the stomach of this dog right here. Put my lines on the stomach of this dog. Give me an earpiece. I need an earpiece. I'm trying to get his language. Give me an earpiece. Say the lines to me. Do you do you do you live near do you live near the river? The Ohio River, sir? Uh-huh. When I was younger, my dad would take me on that river, and there was a plantation. Must have been a plantation, a gardenia plantation. Seemed just as if heaven fell to the earth in the form of gardenias. That's not great. I've done better. That's more of a that's too De Niro-y. That's too De Niro. You know what they're looking at? No, that's you know what they're looking at? What, boss? Us. What are you, a monk? There's a flip side to that coin. What if you do got me boxed in? Because there is nothing I will not do if I feel the heat round the corner in 30 seconds flat. No, Brando is amazing in this movie. He's wearing this hat in the film version. He's wearing a hat that's like hollow and they like it's metal and they like put like it's an ice bucket. It's an ice bucket hat. It's a bucket head. He's a bucket head. He's Limp Biscuit. By the way, I didn't know that Buckethead comes from Richmond, Virginia. I didn't know that. Shouts out to Buckethead, right? I just learned that the other day. But yeah, he's wearing an ice bucket hat, and then of course, he paints himself white, right, like Elizabeth first, and then he's like veiled in this, these flowy robe. It reminds me of what he said about to Coppola about Kurtz in when he was filming Apocalypse Now. He said, "I want to change the name of the character. I don't like Kurtz." He said, "That's the name of Conrad's character, the main character. I don't like the name. I want to change it to Colonel Leilani, something more whispery air like a zephyr. He's much more airy than that." He said that. Okay. If you're lost, by the way, I'm just riffing here on Brando. Then let's see. It says, yeah, the eyes, of course, keep they're luminous in the head. We learn, of course, that he was in the Royal College of Science. His little black eyes wore a brilliant black under his heavy brows. Montgomery says you're an educated man, Mr. Prendick. Says you know something of science. May I ask what that signifies? He looked keenly into my face. He says, I told him I'd spent some years at the Royal College of Science and had done some research in biology under Huxley. Hello? Hello? Of course, because who else really studied under Huxley? Well, H.G. Wells, right? Studied under not Aldous, right? Not Julian. Was it their father? The Huxley line, right? So of course he name drops Huxley here, right? That alters the case a little, Mr. Prendick, he said, with a trifle more respect in his manner. As it happens, we are biologists here. This is a biological station of a sort. His eye rested on the men in white who were busily hauling the puma on rollers toward the walled yard. I and Montgomery, at least, he added. Then, when you will be able to get away, I can't say. We're off the track to anywhere. We see a ship once in a 12-month or so. Of course, that's not really true because he keeps getting supplies. He's supplied heavily, right, with, with morphine and medicine and instruments and all this stuff, which is always the case with these guys who were tied into the pyramid system. It reminds me of in Fresh. My big question in that movie Fresh was, how does he get these supplies, right? How does he do this stuff? Well, he's still a practicing doctor, but of course the people that he gets the human meat cubes for in that movie, right? They are the ones who run the system. They own it. So of course he can just, they allow this. They want it. He says, he gets on to the point of what he's doing here. He says, let's see. You'll find this island an infernally run place, I promise you. I'd watch my goings carefully if I were you. He said, hesitated and seemed to alter his mind about what was on his lips. I wish you'd help me with these rabbits, he said. Of course, the rabbits on the island signify the kind of, it's not cloning, right? But the rabbits signify the the experimented on mutant people, right? The chimeras uh, start to pursue. They start to eat meat, right, which is against the rules. And they follow the rabbit. They go down this sort of rabbit hole, and they find evidence of these rabbits. And of course, that takes on, by the way, um, a much deeper significance. It's almost like a Golden Bough, Robert Gravesian Celtic significance because um, the dead rabbit. Remember the dead rabbit in Gangs of New York? Where the dead rabbits? She's not really my mother. I know that, Bill. That's Leo talking to Daniel Day-Lewis in Gangs of New York. What's that say? A ghoul? Yeah, a ghoul, Bill. That's Leo. Yeah, but the rabbit takes on more significance, right? They are pursuing. They start finding dead rabbits. But when you see rabbits now, like especially in films and books now, I always think like with that movie Us, the Jordan Peele movie. That was in the trailer. They showed the rabbits in the cages, and they were all white rabbits. There was one black rabbit. And I thought, oh, the movie's about cloning. Now that doesn't spoil the movie. You have to see the film if you haven't seen it. But yeah. I got 5 on it. He says, let's see. I waded in with him and helped him lug one of the hutches ashore. No sooner was that done than he opened the door of it and, tilting the thing on one end, turned its living contents out on the ground. They fell in a struggling heap, one on top of the other. He clapped his hands, and forthwith they went off with that hopping run of theirs, 15 or 20 of them, I should think, up the beach. Increase and multiply, my friends, says Montgomery. Replenish the island. Hitherto, we've had a certain lack of meat here because, of course, the chimeras are not allowed meat, but the people running it are, right? At least Montgomery wants to eat meat. As I watched them disappearing, the white-haired man returned with a brandy flask and some biscuits. Some biscuits, tea and biscuits. Would you like some crumpets, tea and biscuits? If you go to the UK and you think you're going to get tea with biscuits, like you're expecting, coffee and a Hardee's Bojangles biscuit, but it's a little cookie. Thank you for the cookie. Something to go on with Prendick, he said in a far more familiar tone than before. I made no ado, but set to work on the biscuits at once, while the white-haired man helped Montgomery to release about a score more of the rabbits. 3 big hutches, however, went up to the house with the puma. The brandy I did not touch, for I've been an abstainer from my birth. Okay. All right, let's move on to something more significant here in the book. On page 46, I wrote a note. Let's see if I can read my own writing in my haste. It seemed to me a voice was calling me. At the end of this chapter, chapter 9, which is the thing in the forest, this is when he sees this hellish creature in the forest who's going to take on the antagonistic role briefly, because the real antagonist, of course, is Moreau himself. But what I wrote is pain calls him back, so he runs away from the sound of torture and pain into the wilderness where he's hunted by chimeras, products of some torturous pain he hears in the compound brought to experimental fruition, and violently smashes one with a rock, which will lead that chimera into a revolutionary act where he jumps species in the Huxleyan Darwinian Moreau paradigm and becomes the very thing they want. In the meantime, Prendick is drawn back into pain in the compound. Okay, so the way that the island is run, okay, because there's all these, Feruza Balk creatures running around, is that they are they are trauma. They're sort of MK Ultra'd into a fear of mental and psychic and especially bodily pain. Right? They know that if they are called back up to the compound, they're being called back up into the Ewan Cameron facility where it's gonna be terrible, right? Um, Everyone who goes back there, it's very Phoenix esque, right? Very Vietnam Phoenix esque. If you get sent to the center, you're not going to make it, and it's going to be terrible. And we find that is it. It seems in the book like this is a method, right? That this is happening. These experimental procedures are happening as performed by Moreau because he's like aiming to find the perfect splice or whatever. But really, the whole point is the procedure. The procedure is the point. It's the process of creating pain, creating nothingness. It's like creating an inversion. It's evil, right? This guy's sick, and um, they're they are human. They're human and animal, and he is to dominate and lord over them. Which, what does that mean now? What does that mean? Put your thoughts in the chat. What does that mean? What does that stand for now? Because okay, so one thing that I got out of reading some of the analyses and criticism of this book, one thing that I got, one general takeaway is that the academic, I don't want to say the entire academic establishment, but it seems that the mainstay of opinion about Wells and about these books is that, oh, they offer a cautionary tale, and that Wells was, he had these ideas, but he was never truly accepted into either thing, right? Either Fabian socialism or libertarianism or the conservative establishment. He was never really, he never really made it, and that these are just science fiction tales, and they kind of they offer us a kind of didactic moral into why we shouldn't, play around with nature. That's what they say, which is seems to be fine on the surface, but is not accurate, right? That's not really accurate. What I think is the truth is that, um, and we can see this now, is that no, what the things that he said and wanted, and the people he associated with, are so ingrained into creating the very society that we're finding ourselves in that saying he is not a part of it is it's almost like of course they would say that. And what does that mean? Well, that means that how can you read this book with this first person speaker and say that Wells himself wanted these things, right? That he would like want what happens, the things, the nasty shenanigans that go on in this book. How could one say that? Well, again, one way you could say that would be, if that's your argument, would be that, again, there's a difference between the writer and the speaker in the work. The speaker's name is not Wells. He's a different character, right? So just because he's seeing and writing through the eyes of this character doesn't mean that he himself in his real life doesn't want or believe these very things. Right? Do you think? The other is that who comes up with this? Who comes up with these things? Who comes up with this nasty stuff, right? For instance, he says, let's see. These creatures I had seen were the victims of some hideous experiment. These sickening scoundrels had merely intended to keep me back, to fool me with their display of confidence, and presently to fall upon me with a fate more horrible than death, with torture, and after torture, the most hideous degradation it was possible to conceive, to send me off, a lost soul, a beast. To the rest of their Comus route, I looked round for some weapon, nothing, right? He says right there that that's what the speaker thinks is the whole point of him being there in the first place. Which in itself is pretty profound, that he realizes that about the place and then says it. Because why would that be so? Why would they rescue him and then do that? He's one of them. How can a person who says that they care about humans and humanity do this? Right, on page 54, I saw that it was the simian creature who had met the launch upon the beach. He was clinging to the oblique stem of a palm tree. He says, his eyes came back to my hands. He held his out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Afterwards, I was to find that a great proportion of these beast people had malformed hands, lacking sometimes even 3 digits. Right, so they lack the attributes of the 5-fingered man, which becomes a thing for them. That becomes part of their ritual and their religion. I guessed the huts were some rough shelter where he and some more of these beast people lived. He says, I wondered what memory he might have in him, like as if he's got a memory of being human. It was extremely dark, this passage, after the blinding sunlight reflected from the sulfurous ground. They're in a hellscape here. And then chapter 12, the sayers of the law, a hellish place on the lower plane between the rock chasm. That's where it is. So the verbs in this passage, right, on page 57, listen to some of these words, just the language here. The place was a narrow passage between high walls of lava, crack, knotted flow, winding, deep ravine, 8-man, bolt. He says, let's see, there's a lawgiver, blackness, silence, sulfurous, trepidation, intolerable closeness, dim light. Right? This is the place where, this is the setting for the speaker of the law, which we just did the Icelandic sagas. This is where the speaker of the law comes out and in a kind of Animal Farm fashion says, this is the new law. This is like the new Eden, right? This is their law for these creatures. It is a man, he must learn the law. Say the words. Not to go on all fours, that is the law. Say the words. As they did so, they swayed from side to side and beat their hands upon their knees, and I followed their example. I could have imagined I was already dead and in another world. The dark hut, these grotesque dim figures just flecked here and there by a glimmer of light, and all of them swaying in unison and chanting. This is almost like the Sufi. They almost become Sufi here, right? Not to go on all fours, that is the law. Are we not men? Not to suck up drink, that is the law. Are we not men? Not to eat flesh nor fish, that is the law. Are we not men? Not to claw bark of trees, that is the law. Are we not men? Not to chase other men, that is the law. Are we not men? Whoa, dude. Yo, ritualized, man. And then they get this one guy. His is the house of pain. Uh-oh. Somebody sing the song. His is the house of pain. His is the hand that makes. His is the hand that wounds. His is the hand that heals. And so on for another long series, mostly quite incomprehensible gibberish to me about him capital H, him, whoever he might be, right? Moreau is their god, right? I could have fancied it was a dream, but never before had I heard chanting in a dream. His is the lightning flash, we sang. His is the deep salt sea. Oh, damn, dude. So now they are singing sort of profound, de profundis, right? Profound, this profound sort of anti psalm to the power of this God man that created and lorded over them. And of course, the lightning flash is not just, a divine inspiration or a literal flash or like a Zeus flash, but it's the medical process that they undergo, right? It's the shock therapy, the fusion of various animal parts into a weird gene human arachnid octopus monkey person or whatever. I mean, this is also obviously this essay that I'm about to get to points out that all of these kind of weird experiments came to their climax. They came to a sort of climactic point during Dub 2 with that jerk. That guy was a real jerk. That Dr. M, who was, replacing heads with dog heads, just because, right? And that's what this is, just because. That's not all it is, but it's like that. None escape, none escape, none escape, he says. He was the sayer of I am the sayer of the law. He's the lawgiver. I wrote pan equals lawgiver, pagan. He's also like a Pentecostal, Gnostic, law-speaking Nordic, I guess. Yes, okay. So moving on. Yeah, so they capture this beast creature, right? They want to capture this beast creature that broke the law. And this is going to uproot the society that the creatures have established under the rule of Dr. Moreau on the island. And one of the things that happens in terms of the plot is that the speaker here, the main character, is so revolted by the way that these things are treated, but also like he thinks that this whole thing is demonic in how they look, even on the surface. And he's drawn into this like revolution that occurs. This says, let's see. Yes, Dr. Moreau explains. Okay, chapter 14. At least spare me those youthful horrors. Montgomery used to be just the same. You admit it is the Puma. Now be quiet while I read off my physiological lecture to you. Let's see. So in other words, Montgomery has been completely absorbed into the system, right? He's now a part of it. He also felt revulsion at the beginning of when he got there to the island. Page 71, the creatures I had seen were not men and had never been men. They were animals, humanized animals, triumphs of vivisection. You forget all that a skilled vivisector can do with living things, says Moreau. All right, I'll read it like Brando. For my own part, I'm puzzled why the things I've done here have not been done before. Small efforts, of course, have been made. Amputation, tongue cutting, excisions, of course. A squint may be induced or cured by surgery. Then, in the case of excisions, you have all kinds of secondary changes, pigmentary disturbances, modifications of the passions, alterations in the modifications of the passions, alterations in the secretion of fatty tissue. I have no doubt you have heard of these things. He's breathing heavily, right? Of course, but these foul creatures of yours, all in good time. I am only the beginning, right? I am the science. Only in the beginning. Those are trivial cases of alteration. Surgery can do better things than that. There's building up as well as breaking down and changing. You have heard perhaps of a common surgical operation resorted to in cases where the nose has been destroyed. A flap of skin is cut from the forehead, turned down on the nose, and heals in the new position. This is a kind of grafting a new position of part of an animal itself. Grafting of freshly obtained material from another animal is possible. So, in other words, he makes the case that this is all fine because of these instances, right? Right. Yes, yes, Maddie, of course. Yeah, he starts off by saying, I am, right? As if he's the god of this place. Yeah. He says, the rhinoceros rats of the Algerian zouaves are also to be thought of monsters manufactured by transferring a slip from the tail of an ordinary rat to its snout and allowing it to heal in that position. We've seen this. Dude, we've remember the picture of the ear growing on the pig? Remember that a few years ago? I'm just saying that was a picture. That's it. Right. Monsters manufactured, said I. Then you mean to tell me, and so he hasn't a reaction. Then you mean to tell me, and Moreau answers, yes. These creatures you've seen are animals carven and wrought into new shapes. To the study of the plasticity of living forms, my life has been devoted. I've studied for years, gaining in knowledge as I go. I see you look horrified, and yet I'm telling you nothing new. It all lay in the surface of practical anatomy years ago, but no one had the temerity to touch it. It's not simply the outward form of an animal I can change. The physiology, the chemical rhythm of the creature may also be made to undergo all an enduring modification of which, let's say, stabification and other methods of, let's say, in INOC ulation. I'm not going to say that word. Okay. But stabification, basically, with living or dead matter are examples that will no doubt be familiar to you. The medieval practitioners who made dwarves and beggar cripples and show monsters, right? Some vestiges of whose art still remain in the preliminary manipulation of the young mountebank or contortionist. Its chemical reactions and methods of growth to modify the articulations of the limbs and indeed to change it in its most intimate structure. And yet, this extraordinary branch of knowledge has never been sought to an end and systematically by modern investigators until I took it up. Yet one would imagine it must have been practiced in secret before. Some creatures, such as the twins that were on the cover of the Smashing Pumpkins album, and in the vaults of the Inquisition, no doubt their chief aim was artistic torture. But some, at least, of the inquisitors must have had a touch of scientific curiosity. But, said I, these animals talk. He said that was so and proceeded to point out that the possibilities of vivisection do not stop at mere physical metamorphosis. A pig may be educated. The mental structure is even less determinate than the bodily. In our growing science of hypnotism, we find the promise of a possibility of replacing old inherent instincts by new suggestions grafting upon or replacing the inherited fixed ideas. Very much indeed of what we call moral education is such an artificial modification and perversion of instinct. Pugnacity is trained into courageous sacrifice and suppressed sexuality into religious emotion. And that great difference between man and monkey is in the larynx, he said. And then finally, he's questioned, where is your justification for inflicting all this pain? The only thing that could excuse vivisection to me would be some application. And then finally he answers, precisely, but you see, I am differently constituted. We are on a different platforms. You are a materialist. So long as pain underlies your propositions about sin, so long I tell you, you are an animal, thinking a little less obscurely what an animal feels. Jesus. The capacity for pain is not needed in the muscle, and it is not placed there. Pain is simply our intrinsic medical advisor to warn us and stimulate us. All living flesh is not painful, he says. If you wound the optic nerve, you merely see flashes of light, just as disease of the auditory nerve merely means a humming in our ears. Plants do not feel pain, the lower animals. It's possible that such animals as the starfish and crayfish do not feel pain. That with men, the more intelligent they become, the more intelligently they will see that their own welfare, and the less they will need the goad to keep them out of danger. I am a religious man, Prendick, as every sane man must be. He says, it may be I fancy I've seen more of the ways of this world's capital and maker than you, for I have sought his laws in my way all my life, while you, I understand, have been collecting butterflies. This this store men and women set out on pleasure and pain, Prendick, is the mark of the beast upon them, the mark of the beast from which they came. Pain and pleasure there for us only so long as we wriggle in the dust. Bro, do you get it? Do you guys get this book? In other words, he states right there. This is one reason why I did this, because, and why I sort of find it difficult with Wells, because he's so articulate in stating the very arguments of the things that that we fear they want so much. They, you know, want so much, and that like all of those things seem to be going ahead full steam. That it's almost ridiculous. It's like yeah, this guy's a real jerk. Right. This Moreau is he's not a nice guy. He's it's funny because he actually is. This is a great example of someone who is being nice. Right. He's being plenty nice here. He's being polite and nice. But he's not a kind man. You're a kind man. Why don't you get a job, Al? Yeah. He's being plenty nice, but he is this guy is a total demon. He's a total demon person, and he is put there, and he's supported, and he runs this place, and he does all the things that the speaker in the book is kind of deep down in the back of his soul afraid that he's doing, and he ends up doing them. Right. So what happens is basically the creatures rebel, right, and finally the humans are they are ended in terrible ways, um, and including the torture house, right, of Moreau, and there's I mean it's like the chase and the apotheosis and this like in the house of pain they all take on biblical language, biblical symbolism. Um, Later on page 132, like Depop is one of the aims here. Um, the creatures eventually uh, become they lose any humanity that they had, so they become just pure creatures, and they're brought down low. The men in it were all dead, had been dead so long they fell to pieces. When I tilted the boat on its side and dragged them out, everybody's dead. Right. Chapter 22. This is almost the end. In the evening, I started and drove out to sea before a gentle wind from the southwest, slowly and steadily, and the island grew smaller and smaller, and the lank spire of smoke dwindled to a finer and finer line against the hot sunset. The ocean rose up around me, hiding that low, dark patch from my eyes. The daylight, the trailing glory of the sun, right, went streaming out of the sky, was drawn aside like some luminous curtain. And at last I looked into that blue gulf of immensity that the sunshine hides and saw the floating hosts of the stars. The sea was silent and the sky was silent. I was alone with the night and silence. So it began on the water, it ends on the water, right? There's a vast gulf, there's an immense gulf, and there's the mirror of the sea, and there's the starshine, which is contrasted with like the luminous light in the eyes of these creatures, because Moreau claims to want to make them into animated creatures uh, that will that he can make into new a sort of replacement population, and of course they overthrow him. He gets overthrown, from his throne, right? He kind of travels around on this on this throne. Oh, worship me. Oh. He's way less cool, by the way, than Kurtz. Kurtz is obviously like, at least Kurtz is he's out with his people, man. He feels good with his people. He feels at one with his people. No, man. What's he? Look at me. Wrong. And then Kurtz comes back and, is this, the camera's looking up at him, right? And he's camouflaged in the face. He looks like this, Ozymandias or something. In this, we just see this, like, freakish guy who's allowed to run wild with his scientism and do whatever he wants. Hey, how relevant. Hello? So, that's kind of my synopsis and analysis of The Island of Dr. Moreau, the book. Again, sure, yeah, I recommend reading it. I think everybody should read it. Hold on, let me find this image. I recommend that everybody should read it, but I'm not going back to it. Dude, come on, man. Come on. Nope, don't freeze. There we go. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going back to it. I'm not going back to reread this book anytime soon. And it's not because it's horrific. It's not because, but the movie I could rewatch, because the movie at least the movie is bad. But the movie's got Val KIlmer in it, and Val KIlmer is very watchable and very cool, even though he is obviously the bad guy in this. And also, I would certainly go back and rewatch the documentary about the making of the movie, because it's so interesting, right? Yeah, I was trying to bring up my image, but I have a hard time with OBS because, well, that's not interesting to explain. But I cannot figure out how to share video like I want it to be, like everybody else does so seamlessly. So somebody out there, help me out, please. Right? Drop me an email, madmaximism2x's@gmail.com. Tell me how to do this damn thing. War of the Worlds, you guys. War of the Worlds is so well known. Who doesn't know War of the Worlds? Do you guys know this book? Have you read the book? I actually find that most people probably haven't read the book, which is understandable because, again, it's such a classic work, and it's been made into movies, and Orson Welles, and it's one of these things, kind of like 1984, right, where most people, probably you guys have read it, but most people cite the book because they know of it or they've heard of it, like when they talk about it on the breakfast show on the TV in the morning, right? What didn't Orwell say? And a lot of times that was the point of starting the whole channel in the first place, by the way, because people incorrectly cite these works all the time, and they discuss what sort of happens in Brave New World while they actually are talking about 1984 or vice versa. But 1984 and Animal Farm and Brave New World are rereadable, and they should be reread. But this book, it's a great book. It's great. And it's very easy to read. At times, I almost feel like, is this guy the Stephen King of his time? He's not, but you could probably write a paper on that. He was, if not just because he was so successful, these were huge books. They were so popular. And you can see why reading them. I mean, for one, you can imagine he's like, I'm going to write this book, and the threat is going to be these creatures from Mars, right? We're going to call them. We're going to talk about Martians, and people were like, "That's unbelievable, Martian. They're from that planet up there. They're gonna take me globby wobbles. I believe you." And what's crazy is that, like, now that's the normal way of thinking for people. Not necessarily Martians, but the glob creatures from the planet Nibiru or whatever, and the octopus aliens from that movie Arrival. Remember that? Which the point of that movie was, time's a flat circle, and they're coming from the future, but we're going to help them in the past for the future because the two things are the same, right? And who, by the way, who's the sort of Deus ex machina in that? Um, Xi Jinping. Remember, she calls Xi Jinping on his private BlackBerry, and he answers, and she's like, uh, the glob creatures wrote a poem, and it said that you need to listen to me and do all this stuff, and he's like, okay, that literally happens in the movie. um, I like the movie, coming down on the cosmic egg and doing all that stuff, but the problem is with that film, just to riff for a second. The problem with that movie is the same problem with these A24 movies, which is that the tone doesn't change. It's flat the whole movie. It's the people speak at sort of the same volume. The tone is the same. Everything is serious. We can tell right away when we meet the lady that she's full of tragedy. Her eyes are, they're full of pain, and it's like, yeah, but if that's the case, there are brief instances where they try to change it, and they're like, look back at this memory she has of, pushing her child on the swing or whatever. But that makes it even sadder. Right? They should have made it gooder. No, but do you get what I'm saying? Midsummer, it's the same tone throughout you're full of dread the entire movie, right? It's the entire movie. And so it's no surprise that the bad thing is going to happen. It's just a question of how bad is the bad thing going to be and what's it going to look like, right? I think that the only sort of example of that, of something that sort of veers from that, might be, well, Hereditary, and The Witch. Both of those are, yes, they are very similar to those, and the tone kind of does stay the same in terms of the terror that you're going to experience watching those. But those movies are different because, first of all, they came at the beginning of that sort of cycle of films, and second of all, the terrible things that happen, you can't really predict how bad they're going to be, right? And the main selling point on those two films, The Witch and Hereditary, I can sort of group those together, is that the thing that happens in the end, without spoiling them, the thing that happens in the end of both of those is, again, what you are deeply, deeply afraid of happening. And you wonder, at least I did watching them, I wonder whether they'll go all the way and how they're going to play this out. Is it going to be like, oh, it was all a dream? Or, oh, they get away? Or, there's some sort of resolution where, they attempt to show a happy ending. But the thing about those two films is that the happy ending is only happy for the reverse people, for the demon people. It's their happy ending. Does that make sense? It's absolutely the happiest ending that they would want in those two films. I'm talking about the characters in the films and what they represent. I mean, if you disagree, let me know. Have you seen those? Have you guys in the chat? Like, have you guys seen those? Or if you're watching this later, have you seen Hereditary and The Witch? Now, look, I know I'm on a total riff, and those don't seem to have anything to do with the War of the Worlds, but they do. They do. They're in the same universe because the language that he uses to go through this journey in this book is metaphysically loaded, and it's the illusions are religious. They take on a religious tone. So even though he's literally describing like spaceships and stuff, the way that they carpet the earth in blood, in this blood vine, in this red weed, is obviously supposed to take on the kind of spiritual significance and fear, right, that you imagine in a kind of like earthly hellscape, because they're vampirical. We learned that the aliens in War of the Worlds are vampirical. They actually don't eat. They're not here to like cannibalize human beings in the sense that they're going to like eat the flesh. They're sucking the blood. They're harvesting the blood. Right? They're taking the life energy out of people, and of course, the vampirical sucking blood is at its very essence an inversion of the Eucharist, right? It's an inversion of that. Does that make sense? In-depth literature says, you're right, Bazed. That's what makes a great story sometimes is the victory from the adversary's perspective. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. And we rarely really get that, at least to that extent, which I thought I don't agree with it, obviously. But what I'm saying is that it was stunning and brave that they went that far with it. Tommy Jones, who's a member, says last movie I watched was Abbott and Costello meet Frank and Stein. Right? They don't do new stuff very much. Don't do new stuff very much. Yeah, I get you. I understand that. Shouts out to Tommy Lee Jones in the chat right there. I don't care, he says. Was it worth it? Yeah, if you're strong enough. I can't do a Tommy Lee Jones. It's too like it's a unique voice, but it's kind of too normal to do, right? It's not like Baja down in Baja. He doesn't have that strange of a unique voice, right? Let's see here. Okay, so War of the Worlds. Let's start off here. The coming of the Martians, right? We get Martians right away. The Martians. What does he say in No Country for Old Men? Give me a Tommy Lee Jones line. We've of course done No Country for Old Men. If you haven't seen my analysis of that, it's my second biggest one, right? He's what does Woody Harrelson say in the film? He's a psychopath, right? But I'll get him. Call it. Call it. But I'd need to know what I'm calling for. Call it. Call it. Put it in your pocket. Put it in your pocket. Call it. Hold on. Call it. Call it. Put it in your pocket. You've been taking it your whole life. Call it. But I need to know what I'm calling for. Did you not hear me? All the rooms are booked. What does that lady say? She's the best character in the whole thing. She's the best character, kind of like Liam in The Big Lebowski. Remember Liam and me? Remember Liam? Yeah. So, look, if you want me to do a big stream, if you want to sponsor a stream, what I'm looking for is I really want to do I want to do Firewalk with me and the Mark Frost books. But you're gonna have to support me to do that. I can't do that really without you. The books are first of all expensive, and I would like to do Dario Argento Phenomena, Hereditary, and maybe The Witch again. I would like to do those with DPH, David Patrick Harry. I want to invite him to do Hereditary. I don't know if he wants to do that because he hadn't seen it. Somebody brought it up in his chat the other night, Hereditary, and he hadn't seen it. And I told him afterwards, yeah, don't watch that with your beloved, right? With your bride, if she's a delicate flower. I can't imagine a lot of people want to watch those films, but we'll watch them for you and we'll discuss them, right? Damn, those are heavy films, dude. Right? Wouldst thou like to live fergaliciously? The taste of butter. Remove thy shift, he says. Ugh. Nasty. That's nasty. Book 1, The Coming of the Martians. The Eve of the War. no one, start of the book, no one, no, negative, no. No one would have believed in the last years of the 19th century that this world was being watched keenly and closely by intelligences greater than man's and yet as mortal as his own. There's a lot in that. That's not even the full sentence, but there's a lot in that, right? So we get that there is someone else outside, right? Uh, Blavatsky and the Watchers are up there, and they are mortal. They're mortal as us, but they are greater than, of course, because they come from somewhere else. Is what he's implying here. Intelligences. He says that as men busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied. Good alliteration. Perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacency, men went to and fro over this globe about their little affairs, serene in their assurance of their empire over matter. That's we could do 2 hours just on that. We're not going to, but we could. Infinite complacency, right? So we get a never-ending sort of abstract factor for people doing insignificant things, which implies, right, that everything we're doing is just stupid. Now, yeah, look, I get it. It's like Bodie says in Point Break, right? As people go around in their metal coffins, man, they have no idea how to live. But their empire over matter is interesting because the empire is in effect at this time, right? The British Empire, but then over matter itself, it is possible that the infusoria under the microscope do the same. No one gave a thought to the older worlds of space as sources of human danger, or thought of them only to dismiss the idea of life upon them as impossible or improbable. It is curious to recall some of the mental habits of those departed days. At most, terrestrial men fancied there might be other men upon Mars, perhaps inferior to themselves and ready to welcome a missionary enterprise, yet across the gulf of space, minds that are to our minds as ours are to those of the beasts that perish, intellects vast and cool and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. And early in the 20th century came the great disillusionment. Uh, Only a couple of those phrases are used in the film, right? In the Tom Coom Spielberg film, and I'm just going to kind of go through the film as I go here. Yeah, it's thank you. Somebody gifted a membership. Thank you. Appreciate that. Kalantar says Conan the Barbarian stream based on cut with what's that say? Arnold and Milius commenting would be awesome. That's a great film. The lamentation of the women. Um, Oliver Stone, right? Oliver Stone did Conan. Didn't he write it? He wrote the screenplay. But what we're getting here, one of the things that is said in the film at the beginning is right. The what does he say? Minds that are to our minds as ours are to those of the beasts that perish. He says, intellects vast and cool and unsympathetic. Right? They are. This is a sort of what we get from this is that an objective, superior intelligence sees us like quantum ants, but that's not really accurate because if we're the ants, why would they want anything from us? We don't want anything from the ants. So it's more than that, right? Um, it has. Let's see. He says fact that it is scarcely 1/7, he's talking about Mars here, of the volume of the Earth must have accelerated its cooling to the temperature at which life could begin. It has air and water and all that's necessary for the support of animated existence. You guys like that movie, The Martian, with Matt Damon? Remember? That movie obviously takes its cue from this. I mean, it's a lot more than that. It's, that was the start of the big push for all things, space, and sort of humanizes it. But I gotta say that that movie, I like watching that movie because again, it's a survival movie, and and it's watchable and how kind of silly it is. But it's just a silly watchable movie. Um, I didn't like the thing about like all he has is disco music, right? He's gonna play the woman's disco music the whole time. What? That's stupid. Why would the woman have? Well, you know what? It's probably believable. It is probably believable. In fact, it would probably be more believable that she would have. What would be the terrible music that this one woman would have? She'd probably have. What's the bald guy that sang on American Idol that all the wine moms liked? It would be that guy. It would be his music. It wouldn't even be something bad like, it wouldn't be Sixpence None the Richer. Kiss me. I'm on the bed at my-" it wouldn't be that. It would be something it would be a Harry Styles album. That's all he would have to listen to, right? He would just have a Harry Styles album. Watermelon sugar. Nah. I like Zayn. I like Zayn's album. Just the music. I don't know about Zayn or whatever, but I like that music. That album. He talks about the secular cooling that must someday overtake our planet, and like as if he wants it to. Yes, that's it. Yes, thank you, first person cue. Daughtry. Yeah, remember Lois liked it in Family Guy? Oh, the Daughtry concert. Um, its physical condition is still largely a mystery, but we know now that even in the equatorial region that the midday temperature barely approaches that of our coldest winter. Its air is much more attenuated than ours. Its oceans have shrunk until they cover but a third of the surface. Okay. And then later on, he says, Miles Summer to them, a morning star of hope, our own warmer planet, green with vegetation and gray with water, with a cloudy atmosphere, eloquent of fertility, with glimpses through its drifting cloud wisps of broad stretches of populous country and narrow navy crowded seas. And we men, the creatures who inhabit the earth, must be to them at least as alien and as lowly as are the monkeys and lemurs to us. The intellectual side of man already admits that life is an incessant struggle for existence. Okay, here we go. Right, here we go. This is his Darwinian eventually Depop view of the earth, right? It's a struggle for existence, and it would seem that this too is the belief of the minds upon Mars. Their world is far gone and it's cooling, and this world is still crowded with life, but crowded only with what they regard as inferior animals. To carry warfare sunward is indeed their only escape from the destruction that generation after generation creeps upon them. It's funny how this whole part goes sort of unnoticed in terms of how important it is in understanding this book, because he's spending a whole section here, creating this race in our minds of people on another planet, and then going so far as to discuss their spiritual needs and the struggles that they must go through because it's a reflection of what he sees as our own. But can that logically be the case? It's fine. He's telling a story, whatever. He can make up what he wants. But um, would that be the case? I mean, I guess it would if his worldview is completely, a social Darwinistic, struggle for existence. Then that would be the same everywhere, right? That would be uniform in terms of the physical laws. But it doesn't really make sense because if the analogy is that they see us like we see monkeys, but we don't need to kill the monkeys, right? We don't need anything from them. Why would they, if that were the case, why would they want anything from us? Yes? Okay, so let's get going here. Um, he says at the end of this chapter, this is still the first chapter, which is introduction and exposition. One night, um, the first missile that could scarcely have been 10 million miles away, I went for a walk with my wife. With my wife. It was starlight, and I explained the signs of the zodiac to her. which is fine. That can be normal, right? Um, but she's like, what does it mean that there's Gemini? Is that Orion? Is that Orion's belt? I've never heard of that. What's that? And pointed out Mars, right? A bright dot of light creeping zenithward, good word, toward which so many telescopes were pointed. It was a warm night. Coming home, a party of excursionists from Chertsey or Isleworth passed us singing and playing music. All was good. There were lights in the upper windows of the houses as the people went to bed. From the railway station in the distance came the sound of shunting trains. The ringing and rumbling, softened almost into melody by the distance. My wife pointed out to me the brightness of the red, green, again, and yellow signal lights hanging in a framework against the sky. It seemed so safe and tranquil. Wake up! You can't remember where it was. Had this dream stopped? Yeah, so he sees the lights in the sky in the distance. Obviously, Stephen King took this and did this with it, right? With the three lights. Also, what's the movie? Close Encounters of the Third Kind. We get the lights coming down. We even see it in Predator. Remember at the beginning, we see the spaceship like orbiting Earth, and then it goes down into the jungles of South America, where a giant man in a DARPA body mod suit does his psyop Moreau style against a group of Contras, right? Let's see. Yeah. I think Oliver Stone wrote Conan. So the Falling Star. Okay. I said, let's see, the Evening Star, and the Evening Star. Something from a war planet in red, Luciferian imagery. Yeah, then came the night of the first falling star, so we get the falling star here. The end of the world, or what they think is the end times. It was seen early in the morning, rushing over Winchester eastward, a line of flame high in the atmosphere. I guess it's no accident that it's over Winchester, right? So we see Winchester Cathedral. I used to live near Winchester. I went to that's where I went to that rave. And saw John Digweed and Sasha and Paul Oakenfold back in the day. But yeah, Winchester Cathedral, one of the great sights of England. Hundreds must have seen it and taken it for an ordinary falling star. Let's see. Albin described it as leaving a greenish streak. There we go, behind it, that glowed for some seconds. Denning, our greatest authority on meteorites, stated that the height of its first appearance was about 90 or 100 miles. It seemed to him that it fell to Earth about 100 miles east of him. So basically, notice what's also happening here is that what's the deal with Mars? Why is it all red? Right? Why are they so angry? What's the deal? What's the deal with Mars? Do they have to be so angry? Somebody give me a Seinfeld joke. Somebody give me a Martian Seinfeld joke. What's the deal with the Martians? What, they only have 3 fingers? Why do they only have 3 fingers? Somebody make a joke out of that. What's the deal with Mars? The whole planet's face has to be red? He's like my drunk Uncle Gordon after a glass of gin. That's more of a Norm joke. Thanks for bearing with me here for my Norm dad jokes. But what's happening here is interesting because we clearly see the point of view, right? We get a first person speaker, and we know that he's going to survive. We know he's going to survive from the beginning. You forget that when you're reading it, or if you read it for the first time and you don't know that he survives. Spoiler alert: he survives because he's speaking in hindsight. The whole book is told in hindsight. Yes. So we know that he consulted the authorities to find out what this meant. So we see the things, the stars falling, the Satan stars, like falling from the sky. Are they meteorites? We don't know. And then he starts describing them as cylinders. And then here we go. It starts to get good on about page 32. You can read this book really quickly. On page 32, he says it was rounded and had, one might say, a face. There was a mouth under the eyes, the lipless brim of which quivered and panted and dropped saliva. The whole creature heaved and pulsated convulsively. A lank tentacular appendage gripped the edge of the cylinder. Another swayed in the air. So this is the start, right, of the description. Kit says, "What's the deal with Mars? Take me to your leader? Would it kill you to have a little decorum? Hey, how you doing? How's you? How's the kids? Would you mind taking me to your leader? Why do they have to be so rude? Can't they have any decorum on Mars?" Do they have what about, do they have answering machines on Mars? Right? What, they can't leave me a message? You can't call me back later? I'm offended that I'm not on your speed dial. Those are all real things that he said in that stand-up. Remember I said I saw Seinfeld do stand-up last year? And he said, all right, I'm going to take suggestions from the audience. Who wants to hear a story about the Seinfeld days? I'm just a regular guy. And I said, tell us your answering machine joke, which is a Norm joke. So he's describing the aliens here. And this is obviously the start of what we see as, all alien descriptions, even the one in the desert that was found recently, right? In the stone with the face. It's also clearly, obviously he had seen Crowley's, what was the name of Crowley's alien demon? Not Pan. What was the name of it? The one that he drew, you guys, when he was on Cefalù, when he was in Sicily. Remember he did the ritual. Somebody give me the name of the Crowley demon, the alien demon, which is the start of the alien demon visions. Right. Was it Iwas? No, Iwas was his demon that spoke to him that led him to Horus. When he was in the desert. It was a different one, right? Lamb, that's it. It was Lamb, yeah. Which is obviously, an inversion of the lamb, the Christian lamb, right? And Mal, right? Inverted Mal. Evil. Evil. Yes. When Celia. Have you ever heard his poem, When Celia Comes? It's terrible. When Celia Comes, he says. I was in the desert, and I saw a lamb. All right, so let me get back to it here. He says, wedge-like lower lip, the incessant quivering of his mouth, the gorgon groups of tentacles, the tumultuous breathing of the lungs in a strange atmosphere, the evident heaviness and painfulness of movement due to the greater gravitational energy of the earth. Above all, the extraordinary intensity of the immense eyes, right? That's Lamb, were at once vital, intense, inhuman, crippled, and monstrous. There was something fungoid in the oily brown skin, something in the clumsy deliberation of the tedious movements unspeakably nasty. Even at this first encounter, this first glimpse, I was overcome with disgust and dread. Suddenly, the monster vanished. It had toppled over the brim of the cylinder and fallen into the pit with a thud like the fall of a great mass of leather, and I heard it give a peculiar, thick cry. No, a thick cry. Hold on. What if it just did a kitty cat noise? Right, these fucking aliens are going to be nothing. Get them. And forthwith, another of these creatures appeared darkly in the deep shadow of the aperture. They were standing like myself in half fascinated terror, staring at these creatures, or rather at the heaped gravel at the edge of the pit in which they lay. And then, with a renewed horror, I saw a round black object bobbing up and down on the edge of the pit. It was the head of the shopman who had fallen in, but showing as a little black object against the hot western sky. And now he got his shoulder and knee up, and again he seemed to slip back until only his head was visible. Suddenly he vanished, and I could have fancied a faint shriek had reached me. I had a momentary, ow! He goes, ow! I had a momentary impulse to go back and help him, that my fears overruled. So, all right, what's the point of this? What's the point of the description? The point of the description here, in all seriousness, the point of the description is one thing that is consistent throughout this book is that the speaker witnesses this thing happen, and he's overcome with shock and awe, and it's only later in hindsight that he can describe it. But he's accurate and genuine in his descriptions of what happened. But it's funny because it seems formulaic and it reads kind of like we're reading Jekyll and Hyde, right? Like as if these are sort of commonplace events, and the language that's used to describe them is scientific at times, right? It's almost like he's trying to stick to the empirical data of what it was like to experience this. But what gradually happens is that peppered amongst the descriptions, we find more abstract thinking, and then finally religious and metaphysical language. So it becomes overwhelming into his soul, and mixed in with that, we find that he is bearing witness to this thing, and he starts trying to survive, but he notices how most people, when this happens, are completely oblivious. They're there when this happens, and yet something switches off in them, and they just either go about their lives normally, oblivious to the obvious exterior danger, or they sort of short circuit, right? And it's kind of like we got fight, flight, and short circuit, and they just like pretend it isn't happening, and they just keep going about their lives. So they don't run away, right? And they don't go towards it. They just kind of, and they just keep going. And then we find there's a part in the book where he describes looking down on this like town, and all the people in town are doing another thing which people do, and this is something that's described in the Decameron, where when the plague happened, right? There's a huge group of people who just become Epicurean, they become Bacchic. They show that in a scene there's a great example of that in the movie Independence Day. Remember that? Uh, the spaceships are coming. We have the people, the various religions of the world who are praying, or the people in India are doing these, they're chanting, and then the government people are doing their thing, and then there's the show me them damn aliens. There's those people, but there's also a group of people who are like partying on the rooftop in New York, and they're just they're just getting wasted or whatever because it's the end of the world. They're just having a party, and I think that's one of the strengths of this book. Not that it's not that Wells is able to imagine that this would be the case and visualize it, but that we've seen now that is actually the case. We saw 3 years ago when the big things were happening, that is absolutely the case, and you still see that now. I don't know about you guys, but I experience this all the time, where any illusion or reference to anything that happened, especially that started a few years ago, the big events, people people are basically like, what are you talking about? What happened? What do you mean? Oh, when we had to do that thing? You mean when we had to we had to like work from home? I mean, I guess they say that's how they act, right? That is so he's exactly right in that. It happened. They went through it. It was whatever. It changed literally everything. But it was whatever to them. It's like whatever, and not whatever in a cool way. Whatever in a, I'm gonna go along with it. Whatever it is, whatever they tell me, and then afterwards totally forget about it. So I think that's one of the strengths here. Let me skip to some of the more important passages here. Um, he goes through in, let's see, the chapters kind of work as in sections. When he says, How I Reached Home, everything gets destroyed. And he starts seeing this red weed sprayed everywhere. He says, in chapter 7 page 47, he says, my mind was blank wonder. My muscles and nerves seemed drained at their strength. I dare say I staggered drunkenly. A head rose over the arch, and the figure of a workman carrying a basket appeared, and beside him ran a little boy. He passed me, wishing me good night. I was minded to speak to him, but did not, and I answered his greeting with a meaningless mumble and went on over to the bridge. People are just like they're just trying to get it. What else can they do? I guess in that situation, and that's just the dad and his kid. But um, page 40, let's see, pages 48 and 49. But the trouble was the blank incongruity of this serenity and the swift death flying yonder, not 2 miles away. There was a noise of business from the gasworks, and the electric lamps were all right. And I stopped at the group of people. What news from the common, said I. No, there were 2 men and a woman at the gate. Eh? Said one of the men, turning. What news from the common? I said. Ain't you just been there? Asked the man. I like how he writes in the vernacular of the common man, like it's in a completely overdone way. But it works. Obviously, it works, and that people saw that as, oh yeah, this is actual. But now when you read it, you're kind of like, is he trolling these people? Ain't you just been there? Right? Haven't you heard of the men from Mars? Said I. The creatures from Mars. Quite enough, said the woman over the gate. Thanks, he says. A lot of information. And all 3 of them laughed. I felt foolish and angry. I tried and found I could not tell them what I'd seen. They laughed again at my broken sentences. You'll hear more yet, I said, and went on to my home. Right? He goes home. His wife. I went to my wife at the doorway. So haggard was I. Shouts out to Chase and Tristan. I went into the dining room, sat down, drank some wine, and as soon as I could collect myself sufficiently, I told her the things I'd seen. The dinner, which was a cold one, had already been served and remained neglected on the table while I told my story. There is one thing, I said, to allay the fears I had aroused. They are the most sluggish things I ever saw crawl. They may keep the pit and kill people who come near them, but they cannot get out of it. But the horror of them. Don't, dear, said my wife, knitting her brows and putting her hand on mine. Poor Ogilvy, I said, to think he may be lying dead there. My wife, at least, did not find my experience incredible. When I saw how deadly white her face was, I ceased abruptly. They may come here, she said again. They can scare some. What is this, like, conversation? Right? He goes home and he, like, sits down, right? I'm sorry if the chicken got overcooked, right? He's just seen the DARPA alien demons. I guess these are, this isn't the hologram. This would be the actual alien demons getting here, right? And he says, yeah, the chicken's overcooked, right? And his wife's like, no, well, don't stress yourself. It'll all be well. Right? That indeed was the general opinion. Both the Times and the Daily Telegraph, for instance, insisted on it the next morning, and both overlooked, just as I did, 2 obvious modifying influences. I love how he still gets the morning paper. Right? The alien invasion happens, and he still gets the paper, which is very true even now, right? Well, I don't think anything's happening anywhere. I didn't see it in the New York Times this morning. Imagine getting a paper now. If you're a person who still gets a paper delivered, that's good. Good for you, right? As long as you're not keeping them like in stacks in the back room. Right. Like, and they're all yellow. I still got the paper from the Big 9. I got 9 copies of it. Right? You got to get rid of that junk. They are mad with terror. Perhaps they expected to find no living things, certainly no intelligent living things, he says. For in those days, even philosophical writers had many little luxuries. The crimson purple wine in my glass, he says, photographically distinct. At the end of it, I sat tempering nuts with a cigarette, regretting Ogilvy's rashness and denouncing the short-sighted timidity of the Martians. I did not know it, but that was the last civilized dinner I was to eat for many strange and terrible days. Let's see. I'm gonna skip a big part here. Page 96. Then, advancing obliquely toward us, came a fifth. Their armored bodies glittered in the sun as they swept swiftly forward upon the guns, growing rapidly larger as they drew nearer. One on the extreme left, the remotest that is, flourished a huge case high in the air, and the ghostly, terrible heat ray I'd already seen on Friday night smote towards Chertsey and struck the town. At night, uh, let's see. At the sight of these strange, swift, and terrible creatures, the crowd near the water's edge seemed to me to be for a moment horror struck. And there was no screaming or shouting, but a silence, which is a great detail. This is one little sentence. That little sentence right there is honestly one reason why this book is sort of elevated above, not just because it's the first of these kind, but because it is more adeptly composed than any of the sort of knockoff or derivative works. And that would be expected. But what he does here is he subverts the reader's expectations. So we expect in our mind as we're reading it, and you wouldn't say all this as you're reading the book, but we would expect with a giant heat ray, right, and this glittering alien, mobile bearing down on them that vaporizes masses of humans at once. You would expect people to be screaming in horror and terror as he set up, but instead there's a great silence, and that's what makes it more profound. Yes, because it means that a huge group of the population is kind of coming to terms with their end, and it's the stillness and the silence that gives it a sense of true horror. What do you think? Right. Tommy Jones says, old news papers is the only source I trust. That and the cryptic messages in my dreams. Yeah. Well, the only thing I trust is the hungry dungry sandwich in my tummy wums. Can I get Cheetos on top of that? Ding! That's Bodie. What's he searching for? The ride. The ultimate ride. Was H.G. Wells' Illuminate confirmed? Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, good question. Was H.G. Wells' Illuminate confirmed? Yes. The answer to that one, which is different from how we, a lot of times we don't have that clear yes. But yes, big time. Big time. Like biggest big time in a long time. Was this dude Illuminate confirmed? I mean, yes, in every way. Right. I mean, look, I don't know. I'm not, great at Wells's biography. Frankly, his it's not interesting to me in terms of like how I, with like it is with other writers. I mean, personally interesting. I'm, I guess intellectually interested in his what he did, his activities, and his writing. But like, he didn't grow up in the elite structure that you would imagine he did. Is what they say, I guess. And but I guess he was probably a boy genius. I know that he was sick a lot when he was younger, kind of like, a lot of writers are like that. They still appear sickly and poorly later. Like we covered that with Bram Stoker, right? That was probably the case with, I guess, Yeats. And that's what drove them into the world of books and reading. And then, he became an apprentice for whatever, and that didn't work out. And then eventually, he worked his way up, and then was, taught by Huxley and all these people. And then all the stuff happened. But he was part of all those things. Even the normie sources will be like, yeah, he could just call on an audience with, with Stalin or, Roosevelt or whoever, and just he got it right away. Yes. Yes. So eliminate, confirm. Yeah, and I mean, if you want more on that, you got to go again back to Jay's Globalist book series because honestly, it's the best. It's the best at dealing with all that material, right? The Anglo-American establishment. Um, what's the one? The remember that the Jay video on with the French fry hat, right? Pope of the future. I am the Pope of the future, right? And the I live on the French fry aisle. Classic video, classic Jay video. That was within a H.G. Wells analysis. So go back to those. Let's see. My note here on page 97. Token-esque language. Now we see the alien enemy clothed in armor and death with a sort of quasi-medieval diction and cadence. Right, especially, and I smote him up on the mountainside, which is also pseudo-biblical language. But we see that this is more than just, it's not a human enemy. It's not just a monster enemy. It's something otherworldly and other. Let's see. He says, but with technology that he's starting to recognize. Page 98. They're getting shelled. The shell burst clean in the face of the thing. The hood bulged, flashed, was whirled off in a dozen tattered fragments of red flesh and glittering metal. The glittering here, and when he says on the previous page, their armored bodies glittered in the sun. I mean, that I can't help but think that this is taking on the sort of aspect of a kind of holy war or a war, a war in heaven. Right? We get Lucifer glittering in the sun, right? Making war. And so he's obviously, I mean, I'm not sure if it's obvious, but that's the illusion that I take from this, that it becomes a kind of spiritual war. And let's see. In the next chapter, he's questioning what this means. What does it mean? What does it mean? What do these things mean? I love that he includes that, by the way. Again, that's another thing that separates this from the derivative works because someone literally asks, what does it mean? They're at a loss. They're in the pre-postmodern, right? The genesis of the modern era, which begins with this invasion. That's another reason why they, put Orson Welles up to using this as a psychological experiment on a mass scale, right? Future shock. Future shock. Yes, is what Wells called it. And a human being, a person bothers to ask, what does it mean? On page 109, the tribulation, this must be the beginning of the end, this guy says, interrupting me. The end, the great and terrible day of the Lord, when men shall call upon the mountains and the rocks to fall upon them and hide them from the face of him that sitteth upon the throne. I began to understand the position. I ceased my labored reasoning, struggled to my feet, and standing over him, laid my hand on his shoulder. Be a man, he says. You're scared out of your wits. The speaker here says, what good is religion if it collapses under calamity? Think of what earthquakes and floods, wars and volcanoes have done before to men. Did you think God had exempted Weybridge? Is he not? It says, he is not an insurance agent. But how can we escape? They are invulnerable. They are pitiless. So what's interesting here is that this situation is where he comes upon this this religious, is what you call the guy, and he's obviously falling into, he's seeing this in spiritual terms, blatantly, right? But the problem is that this character is only talking and not acting. But the problem with the speaker is that for him, he sees the position the guy has, but there's also action required. But what conflicts with him, like, and this is not just in this scene, but this is throughout the book, that the speaker in the book is almost an exemplar of the age of reason of enlightenment thinking, where everything is supposed to be logical and scientific in a way that precludes, uh, you know, it's a it's not deistic. It's a mechanical world, right? And so we're presented with this kind of dialectic, right, where we have this and this, but we don't have a character who represents a fusion of that within the book. If you disagree, let me know, especially later in the chat. Let me know about, I mean, in the comments. Um, then on page 127, we get the poisonous vapor clouds. Of course, this is also like, this is vampirical language. This is like one of the forms of Dracula language because, again, the aliens are vampirical. They are uh, harvesting the blood, literally the blood of human beings. They don't eat, they don't eat solid things. They don't eat flesh. They sort of suck it up and then they spread this poisonous red blood weed all over the earth because that's going to be their atmosphere. But the problem is for them, we see that what they reap, they sow, and that because of the blood everywhere, they're going to also take in all of the biology of the earth, and of course, the germs in the book are what's going to get them. I remember Morgan Freeman in the movie, in the Tom Coom movie. What they had not counted on was the simple germ. Like a Twinkie, like a Twinkie. So let's see. Nightmare World, page 16, the Exodus from London, the Nightmare World. He says when he gets to London, revolvers were fired, people stabbed, and the policemen who had sent to direct traffic, exhausted and infuriated, they were breaking the heads of the people they were called out to protect. That's not funny. What I think is funny is that, uh, yeah, isn't that to be expected? Like, wouldn't you see that? Isn't that true? They send the coppers out there with billy clubs, right, to keep order and to protect the people, and then they end up getting frustrated and just clunking heads together. But this is from that he even notices this back then, yes, and that the things haven't changed. He says he heard their screams and hurrying round the corner saw a couple of men struggling to drag them out of the little pony chaise in which they had been driving, while a third, with difficulty, held the frightened pony's head. One of the ladies, a short woman dressed in white, was simply screaming. The other, a dark, slender figure, slashed at the man who gripped her arm with a whip she held in her disengaged hand. Everybody's going crazy. This is the end of the world. Everybody's turning on each other. Um, my brother, realizing from his antagonist's face that a fight was unavoidable and being an expert boxer, went into him forthwith and sent him down against the wheel of the chaise. So one thing that they leave out of the film is that he meets up with his brother, and his brother is a pugilist, right? And he starts to fight off these dudes. Um, he heard the clatter of hooves. The whip stung across his face. A third antagonist struck him between the eyes, and the man he held wrenched himself free and made off down in the lane in the direction from which he'd come. Um, the man before him, a burly rough, tried to close, and he stopped him with a blow in the face. Then, realizing that he was deserted, he dodged round and made off down the lane after the chaise, which turns into the car in the film, and the sturdy man close behind him, and the fugitive, who turned now, followed remotely. Um, and then a woman has a revolver. Somebody fires a revolver. This is the kind of like the scene in the film where they're driving the minivan. You remember that? They're in the minivan, and Tom Coom Tom Coom, for some reason, has the only gun in a crowd of like 10,000 people, and they all start trying to take over this minivan. A guy like, That's a good scene in the. Thank you, Tommy. Let's see. Tommy Jones gifted another membership. Thank you for the memberships, everybody. Really, shouts out to you guys for the memberships. Really appreciate all the memberships here. Leaves of Grass got a membership. Living the Dream. Melly, Keeks, right? Max O'Neill. Thank you for the memberships. Really appreciate it. Listen, thank you so much for the support tonight. I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate it. And that means a lot to me. This is the first time we just launched the memberships. I just launched them. Forgive me, I'm a newbie, boomer teching it here when it comes to the memberships. But we're gonna get gifts and we're gonna get all the fun stuff. And I'm gonna start having more stuff. Okay, it's time to start having more stuff. We need more stuff, right? Especially on the screen here, right? Look at how our homeboys do all that stuff. It's so good, right? We need to have more stuff. Jethro's been telling me for a while. Shouts out to our brother Jethro out there. I'm just boomer tech. I'm doing the best I can, people. One thing is, it's like everything is so sensitive on the screen with all the stuff, right? And you see that how streams come and go with people, right? That you touch one damn thing and the whole thing shuts down. It's like when you open the thing up and then you accidentally hit update on the microphone. And then they're like, "Oh, there's a glitch. Your microphone doesn't work anymore. Sorry." Right? Yeah, Jason says looks like 13 or 14 memberships just this stream. Yo, that's big time. Thank you so much. Let's get that up to 33. Let's get that up to 322 memberships and then get out of that number and just do triple threes. Let's just forget about that altogether. Let's just go into everybody get a membership. Okay. Let's see. He says they began to meet more people. For the most part, these were staring before them, murmuring indistinct questions, jaded, haggard. There's another haggard. Unclean. One man in evening dress passed by them on foot, his eyes on the ground. They heard his voice and looking back at him, saw one hand clenched at his hair and the other beating invisible things. His paroxysm of rage over, he went on his way without once looking back. People are losing their minds in the midst of this. Yes? Terror, distress, agony. There's a maze. Chapter 17, The Thunder Child. If one could have hung that June morning in a balloon, nice rhyme there, in the blazing blue above London, every northward and eastward road running out of the tangled mass of streets would have seemed stippled black with the streaming fugitives, each dot a human agony of terror and physical distress. Damn, what a sentence. I've set forth at length in the last chapter my brother's account of the road through Chipping Barnet in order that my readers may realize how that swarming of black dots appeared to one of these concerned. Never before in the history of the world had such a mass of human beings moved and suffered together. Well, the flood. The legendary hosts of Goths and Huns, the hugest armies. Actually, right? I write a strongly worded letter to H.G. Wells. The hugest armies Asia had ever seen would have been but a drop in that current. I like how he says a current instead of the proverbial bucket, right? But it's a current because it's a moving river of people, and because they're in a sort of in a solid world that looks liquid because of the red weed and because of the incongruous landscape and the smoke and the vapor and the moving alien shells above everything and the falling stars and the people getting vaporized. It looks like a constant, a movement, a current. And this was no disciplined march. It was a stampede, gigantic and terrible, without order and without a goal. 6 million people, oh snaps, unarmed and unprovisioned, driving headlong. It was the beginning of the rout of civilization, of the massacre of mankind. Let's see, this is the next section. This is the second section of the book. I wrote, heavy destruction of the house into ruins and ramparts mirrors the destruction of civilization and the psyche. So he comes upon this house, which is ruined. And, of course, in the book, remember, he goes into the house and not Tim Meadows, not Tim Allen, Tim What's that dude's name? Tim, the guy in Arlington Road. Tim, the real tall actor, that lib actor. Remember that guy's in the basement? He goes into the house. Somebody give me his name. Um, he goes into the house, and this is where he's with the curate. And yeah, thank you, Tim Robbins. Tim Robbins. What happened? Where's he? Right. The last thing I saw him in was Anchorman. Right. So he goes in, and the curate is his character in the movie is kind of a combination of three different characters here. But I said, bet this is part idea for. Oh, this part I said was probably the genesis of the idea for Wild Wild West, that dumbass movie and weird adventure I wrote. That's literally my note, because he says the mechanism it certainly was that held my attention first. It was one of those complicated fabrics that have since been called handling machines, and the study of which has already given such an enormous impetus to terrestrial invention. It dawned upon me first, it presented a sort of metallic spider with 5 jointed, agile legs and with an extraordinary number of jointed levers, bars, and reaching and clutching tentacles about its body. So there's basically a mechanical alien spider that's like crawling over the earth. I bet you anything this was where that. Remember that producer? We actually talked about that in the high concept stream on Don Simpson, right? And Bruckheimer, because there was that producer who insisted that they put the mechanical spider idea into a movie, and they were like, "That's never going to happen." And then later, he finally fitted into Wild Wild West with Will Smith and Ken Branagh. Remember that? Remember the mechanical spider? And that's so. Of course, there's a producer, right, who has an idea for this sort of thing, and is like, "You got to fit it into the movie." Oh, you're doing Ferris Bueller. We need the mechanical spider. People says people who have never seen these structures and have only ill-imagined efforts of artists and the imperfect descriptions of such eyewitnesses as myself to go upon scarcely realize that living quality. And I said, here I said, in a way, there's no absolute indication that the speaker is going to survive, because we sort of now we're at a point in the narrative. This is page like 192, where we think, okay, well, this is, you know, the speaker is writing this almost in the present time, or the hindsight could be like just after the events, but they're still going on because we don't know, like, because we're a first time reader. We're just, we read it like it's new until page 194. Yeah, where he says, because before this he says, with that realization, my interest shifted to those other creatures, the real Martians, and I had a nausea. He says, I now saw the most unearthly creatures it is possible to conceive. They were huge round bodies, or rather heads, about 4 feet in diameter, each body having it in front of it a face. This face had no nostrils. Indeed, the Martians did not seem to have had any sense of smell, but it had a pair of very large, dark colored eyes, and just beneath this, a kind of fleshy beak. In the back of this head or body, I scarcely know how to speak of it, was the single tight tympanic surface, since known to be anatomically an ear, though it must. Oh yeah, okay. So that it must have been almost useless in our. All right, in our denser air. So, in other words, what's described here is a kind of a tympanic nerve in the back. But what this made me think of was, first of all, remember the original stream we did on Beowulf and Grendel, and then we did the stream on the book on Grendel and the dragons, right? And how like these monsters are sometimes described as like they don't have exterior ears; they just have like a nerve. And so the aliens don't have a sense of smell. They don't. I guess they've his impression of it is that it's been whittled down to like the big vision, and they don't need the other senses because they have a psychic capability. and they kind of work in a hive mind. He says the infernal anatomy, I may remark here, as dissection has since shown, was almost equally simple. So now we know that he's going to survive because we know that they've done a kind of reverse engineering and dissection of the aliens. We got data from Star Trek right down there. Show me them damn aliens right down there in Area 51, dissecting the aliens. Before, remember that happens in Independence Day. Remember they psychically inhabit data, right? And they're like, die, right? They want to destroy everybody, but they work through them and speak through them. The pulmonary distress caused by the denser atmosphere and greater gravitational attraction was only too evident in the convulsive movements of the outer skin. There's so much language in this book where it's like we get it, dude. We get it. We get that your worldview is the Enlightenment, reasonable, scientific journal that you get every morning, and that that you learn from Huxley. We get it. It's in everything in this book, which is obviously one of the points. But it can be a bit tedious, if only just because I find it so disagreeable. It's almost like uh, it lacks the blood of a human, which is ironic. So I guess, all right. So I guess in the composition of the book, if you were writing the book, right, if you were to write this story, one of the major struggles in terms of composing the book would be how you would strike a balance between showing the things that you observe and living through them, but also conveying the normal emotions of a human being and your reactions to those things without going overboard and being sentimental. But the problem is that the way that Wells does it, and he intentionally obviously does it, is that we get no sentimentality at all, which kind of shows this like coldness, and it becomes like a pamphlet on reason. But that mirrors the way that the aliens act. I mean, that mirrors what they do, like their reason for existence. Yes, because at the very beginning he states that they're cold and calculated, and that they're of a superior intelligence. But you can see that the speaker here, by recognizing that they are of a superior intelligence, kind of we can infer in a way that he assumes to be close to that level of intelligence, or at least he assumes he is, and his survival sort of proves that to him. And doesn't that make sense in the kind of Darwinian struggle that that we read into the book? Does that make sense? I don't think I'm going too far in trying to interpret why he speaks this way. I think it's important. When you get a first person speaker in a book, right? And it makes sense to have the first person. It makes sense to have that in this book, this point of view, because he's not going to do a third person point of view where we have characters described, right? Which is what happens in Independence Day and the film versions. One thing I'll say about the Steven Spielberg version of this book that I think is impressive is that we do, in terms of our camera point of view in the film, if you notice, the camera is always low. We're always looking at events and landscapes low. In other words, we're seeing them from Tom Coom's point of view. We're not seeing them from, if you go high, if you have a high up, if you have a crane shot, then you're implying that we're seeing it from the alien point of view, right? So we really only see, I think he's pretty consistent in this in the film. We only see those perspectives when Tom Coom himself is in remember when he's captured by the thing and he's in like the metal net thing, right? And he's up with all the humans and he's got to figure a way to escape, and he gets the grenades and all that. So we see a high view when he's there with them. So in other words, the film is consistent in its perspective that like we're with a first person. We are seeing things from Tom Coom's point of view, right? Um, if you didn't do that, then you sort of compromise the integrity of the story, because the point is that they are supposed to be high and that we are low. Does that make sense? Um, I think that's pretty good in the film. The bad thing about the film, the thing that I'll say about the film that doesn't work is, aside from the numerous plot holes and plot devices that fall through, because there are many. The one thing I'll say that's a drawback from the film is that the movie War of the Worlds, the Steven Spielberg Tom Coom movie, was obviously intended as a just post Big Nine vision of the world, and so the alien thing is supposed to be a kind of a metaphor for the attack on the country. It's obvious. That's statedly so. So, it begins like you're in New Jersey and you're looking at the New York, at the cityscape. And by the way, at the beginning of the film, you notice that we see what's Tom Coom doing at the beginning of the film. He's in a crane, right? So he's in a crane. He's manipulating things. He's looking down and he's like moving the shipping containers around with this mechanical like arm, and that mimics or foreshadows what we're going to see the aliens do. So that sort of lets the audience know that he knows mechanical things, and he is good at various moving pieces, and the moving pieces later are going to be like the various levels of threat that occur all around while trying to keep his his daughter alive and all this stuff. So in other words, that works pretty well. But the obvious Big Nine symbolism in the movie is a little much, right? It's a little much. It's a little much in the way where, like in what's the Bruckheimer movie, 13 Hours, and also in Spielberg in Saving Private Ryan, like the movie ends like with the transparent American flag like waving in the sunset. It's that sort of thing. It's that this is a metaphor for this is going to bring all the people together, and this is the best of humanity, which actually is another thing in the film that it gets subverted, because the movie was made 4 years after Big Nine, and the one thing that we especially at the time that we took away in terms of society was that the big disasters bring humans together. New Yorkers are Boston strong, right? New Yorkers, they help each other, and all that happened and everything. But in the film, it's kind of implied that that's what's going to happen, but actually, that turns out not to be the case, because the one scene, especially of when they're in the minivan and they're going towards they're going to get on the ferries, and all the people, like the guy's like grabs the glass and he's like, crushing his fingers and cutting his hands all up trying to get into this car, and then the guy puts the gun to his head, and they crawl into the van regardless of the little girl in there and all that stuff. It's horrible, right? It's absolute chaos, and they're not they're not working together. It's not good. Yeah, so that's again the opposite reality of what happens. And that is pretty truthful to the book, as as we just went through. But of course, in the end, he makes it. Where does he go? He goes from New York he goes up to Boston. He goes up to Boston. Oh, remember, he's wearing a New York hat, wearing a baseball cap in the movie, and his son is wearing a Boston hat. He's like, "Really, Boston?" He throws the baseball real hard, and it shatters the window. Of course, the baseball shatters the window of the house, which is always in movies, right? It always means that the state of mind or the psyche is going to be broken. Things are not going to be normal, right? We're going to lose our sense of who we are, and we're going to look for ourselves, or the characters are going to do that in the film. And that's what happens until the houses get completely blown out. The other big nine scene is when they sleep in the basement of the house, and then they walk out the next morning, and the house is gone from the interior, which implies that the exterior stands. So things are still standing in terms of some semblance of order, but the inside, our interior state has been ripped out. So now we're completely lost because things should be right, but they're not. And then Tom Coom walks down the street, and there's a damn airplane engine. You remember that? There's like a news crew. There's a news crew trying to get the airplane food out of the airplane that crashed, which is a heavily symbolic scene. Yes, I mean obviously that right there is the big nine scene. But what's weird is why does the news crews why does their camera equipment still work? How are they able to charge their stuff? Why does their car still work? They talk in the movie about an EMP. So everything's supposed to be fried. And I get that the minivan works because like if there are no electronics in it, but this car's full of electronics. And the news crew's like perfectly put together. It's like Diane Sawyer's there. She's still got makeup on. She's like, haven't you heard? Don't you know what's happening? Which doesn't make sense. What she says is what the speaker says in the book, right? Where the people just don't know what's happening and they're relaying information word of mouth to each other. But the way she looks isn't consistent at all, right? The fact that they have a vehicle at all. It doesn't. Why on the ferry, when the ferry goes underwater, why are the lights of the cars flat, like shining through the water? I get the stylistic choice. It's eerie, but that doesn't work. That doesn't, the cars are fried. Why are they turned on? Right? What? So, whatever. But it's enjoyable. It's an enjoyable movie. It's a good movie. It's top Tom Coom, right? He's running a whole lot in this movie. Especially when he's running through the New Jersey town and everybody's getting vaporized, turning into dust. Which, by the way, is another thing. That's a clever thing they do in the movie because it's not. There's no like blood gore, right? Like spraying. It's just dust. So for the censors or for whatever, it makes it more. This is a family audience, right? Yeah, like in Donnie Darko. Great point, right? Great point. Cause name. That's an excellent point. I mean, that's pre Big Nine, right? Is it? Did we talk about that? Yeah, it's pre Big Nine. I mean, we did Donnie Darko with Jim Bob, and that was one of the predictive things about that movie. That the engine falls right into the bedroom, and so it crushes out their family life like from the inside, right? Yeah, Jason says I just find it fascinating. Baseball has so many interesting terms and numbers. I find it fascinating that W, you're either with the church or you're with us. I think people probably think that's Mandela effect, right? Because a Mandela effect because they think that he said you're either with the church or you're against them or something like that, but he doesn't. Yeah, he says or you're with us. But I find it fascinating that that W threw that a perfect and patriotic pitch right after Big Nine, right at the big game, and they said, "Sir, everybody throws it from here," and he said, "I'm not going to do that. I'm the decider, and I decide where I'm going to stand. I'm the decider. Fool me once, shame on me. You fool me twice, shame on you. Can't get fooled again." So he went up to the mound and he did throw that pitch. He threw a heater, right? He threw a heater right across Al Qaeda, right? And that was very patriotic, and I was totally into that at the time. I was like, "Fuck yes, right? Hell yeah, of course W's gonna do it, right?" But this time he threw out the the pitch at the start. You guys see that? By the way, and it looked like he's shrunk. You know, they had a weird camera. So he went out there and he didn't stand on the mound and he threw it right before that and he bounced it. And he even had that whole thing the first time about they told me don't bounce it. Everybody bounces it. Don't bounce it. Don't bounce it. So I didn't bounce it. I threw a heater. But this time he bounced the damn thing. Why wouldn't you remember that? Hello? Hello? It would have been a perfect tie-in. Don't bounce the damn thing. Yes? So that was weird. How'd I get on that? Jason said something about baseball. Have you seen my baseball? All right, so let's tie this up. Y'all. It's been a long night, been a long day, and thank you for sticking with me through this analysis. If you're watching this, I hope you're listening to this chilling. You're either at work, right, or you're catching some Z's, or you're waking up in the morning. You're chopping wood. You're out there. You're on your homestead, right? You're in your pod city, right? Or you're driving across the dark, listening in the dark, right? Looking at the storms across the desert. And you're listening to this talk about H.G. Wells. Whatever you're doing, I love you, and I hope you're good. He says on page 206, we're going to bring this to a close here. He says, I said, rage, the elemental things, the fight for civilization reduces him to elemental things in the darkness. He says, but he was one of those weak creatures void of pride, timorous, anemic, hateful souls, full of shifty cunning, who face neither God nor man, who face not even themselves. It is disagreeable for me to recall and write these things, but I set them down that my story may lack nothing. Those who have escaped the dark and terrible aspects of life will find my brutality, my flash of rage, and our final tragedy easy enough to blame, for they know what is wrong as well as any, but not what is possible to tortured men. But those who have been under the shadow, who have gone down at last to elemental things, will have a wider charity. So this is because this guy is going to make all this noise and call out. Remember Tim Meadows, the ladies' man. Tim Meadows in the movie, I'm going to say, is about to get them caught and killed, right? And so he's got to take care of business. He's got a TCB and get rid of him. And that's what he's talking about here. The man on Putney Hill. I said this concerns the killing of the curate, the whereabouts of the Martians, and the fate of his wife. This is where the book. This is at the end of the book, and this starts to use very overtly religious language and imagery. There were no witnesses. All these things I might have concealed, but I set it down, and I can't read it because I wrote over the words here. And the reader must form his own judgment as he will. I was in extremity, but now I prayed indeed, pleading steadfastly and sanely, face to face with the darkness of God. Strange night, strangest in this, that so soon as dawn had come, I, who had talked with God, crept out of the house like a rat leaving its hiding place, a creature scarcely larger, an inferior animal, a thing that for any passing whim of our masters might be hunted and killed. Perhaps they also prayed confidently to God. Surely, if we have learned nothing else, this war has taught us pity. Pity for those witless souls that suffer our dominion. Interesting, right? Because that is always left out, isn't it? That is always left out of the films. Anything like this is always left out of the films. Matthew Perry was taking a dark bath. Oh boy, oh no, I hope not. Oh dear, Moldy, that's terrible. It's terrible. That's terrible. Let's see. Now we get a new status quo. Page 243, a new status quo. I said, new state of affairs. They don't want to bother us yet. They're making their things, making all the things they couldn't bring with them. That's what the aliens are doing. They're assembling all their stuff. And they have their first, blitz, their first phase of the blitz, and they're, neutralizing all these people and spreading their red weed. But then there's a kind of a lull. And people are saying that, this is for them to form their new offensive, essentially. Oh, look, I even wrote in the notes Bodhi's speech about all these people in their metal coffins, which is exactly pretty much a paraphrase of what he writes on page 244. Um, I had my doubts. You're slender. I didn't know it was you, you see, or just how you've been buried. All these, the sort of people that lived in these houses and all those damn little clerks that used to live down that way, they'd be no good. They haven't any spirit in them, no proud dreams and no proud lusts. And a man who hasn't one or the other, Lord, what is it? What is he but funk and precautions? They just used to skedaddle off to work. I've seen hundreds of them, a bit of breakfast in hand, running wild and shining to catch their little season ticket train for fear they'd get dismissed if they didn't. Working at businesses they were afraid to take the trouble to understand. Going back and for fear they wouldn't be in time for dinner, keeping indoors after dinner for fear of the back streets and sleeping with the wives they married, not because they wanted them, but because they had a bit of money that would make for safety in their one little miserable ski daddle through the world, lives insured and a bit invested for fear of accidents, and on Sundays, fear of the hereafter. So, what he's saying here is this character is speaking in the sense that what people always do, right? They always fall into this. Oh, what does it mean though? Actually, is it any good if if you do things just because of the fear of, the consequences? Well, isn't that how you learn as a child, right? And that because that becomes civilized behavior, right? And you still have choices to make, but there's order. But what he's saying here is that he has a point up to a point, which is that a bunch of these people living their lives go around like living obliviously and not, they're just completely aloof to the fact that if anything did happen, they wouldn't be able to handle themselves. I get that. But then he starts to go into this thing of, which is completely, isn't this Darwinian, right? These people that run things or that think they, I guess he's talking about, the lower to middle classes here, mainly the middle class, that they have no backbone and that they don't deserve it. So in a way, he's kind of advocating a Depop, isn't he? Which is again ironic. Yes. Um, let's see. Finally, we get the off world and space, the deep of space. No life existed beyond the petty surfaces of our minute sphere, and now we see further. There's no reason to suppose that the thing is impossible for men, and when the slow cooling of the sun makes this earth uninhabitable, all at last, as at last it must do, it may be that the thread of life that has begun here will have streamed out and caught our sister planet within its toils. And then finally, I see again the healing valley below, set with writhing flames, and feel the houses behind and about me empty and desolate. That I have seen silent and wretched going to and fro, phantasms in a dead city, the mockery of life in a galvanized body, and strange too it is to stand on Primrose Hill as I did but a day before writing this last chapter to see the great province of houses dim and blue through the haze of the smoke and mist, vanishing at last into the vague lower sky, to see the people walking to and fro among the flower beds on the hill, to see the sightseers about the Martian machine that stands there still, to hear the tumult of playing children, and to recall the times when I saw it all bright and clear cut, hard and silent under the dawn of that last great day. I love the way that that his prose modulates, right? I mean, this is a long sentence because this it's not a stream of consciousness. It's the stream of humanity that he saw in the great current before, and now he is coming to terms with the fact that the thing is over, the invasion is over, and he's standing there and he's wondering, it's dreamlike. He's wondering if it's real, and what are the lessons that they've learned from this, if any. And strangest of all, it is to hold my wife's hand again, and to think that I have counted her and that she has counted me among the dead. And that's it. So the book begins with no and then ends with the word dead. So that's the War of the Worlds. Um, I've got I've got this other paper that I was going to go through, but this is like, I think I might have to save this because we've already been going for 3 hours. What do you guys think? This is from Dr. Moreau to Dr. Mengele, the biological sublime. It's actually a pretty important read, but I think, yeah, I think I may save it. This other one, yeah, is where Bloom said, I'm not sure I could reread any of that now. I also remember reading a lot of the science fiction romances of H.G. Wells, and I'm not sure I want to reread those either. Whereas there are certain things of K. Chesterton, which I read when I was 14 or 15, which I've reread recently. But he just can't bring himself to reread these sci-fi books. But there's a lot in that. The invocatory power of verse of poetry. Let's read some super chats before I do anything because I think some things came in here. Shouts out to everybody who grabbed a membership tonight. Big time support. Shouts out to, let's see. Shouts out to the real John Connor, first of all, who dropped 15 bucks before the stream started. And that was very cool. And he said this is for McDee's and Sigs. Yo, shouts out to Kat out there who drops $5 and says, new glasses, GoFundMe. Thank you. Yes, these are ridiculous. Yes. Thank you for that $5. Appreciate you. Shouts out to Jason out there for that $5. Big time supporter. Thank you so much. Big time supporter. Thank you, Jason. Shouts out to Michelle, who dropped $15 the other day after the stream and said, for cool streams. Thank you so much. Also, Chris dropped $5 and said, donation. Thank you so much. Appreciate you, Chris. Thank you. Shouts out to you. Yeah, real John Connor said, for 2 McChickens and a microphone. I need that McChicken money, y'all. Appreciate you. Preach. Let's see. Yes, thank you so much for that support. I know I'm forgetting somebody here. Somebody else dropped me some support here. Shouts out to our buddy iPack Arts who does the thumbnail work. Appreciate him. And, of course, to Rooks G. Big time. Shouts out to my friend Heel Dog who supported me the other day. Appreciate you. AH. Thank you so much. Let's see. Let's see if Dono Chat's got anything here. Let me refresh this real quick. I think we didn't get anything Dono Chat, but that's expected because we got so much support in the no, go back. Dang. Hold on a sec. Hold on. Bro, this is so. Give me a second here, people. My YouTube messed up. Why would you switch? Why would you switch accounts? Okay, let's see. There we go. All right, let's look at this. Let's check this out. Yo, memberships. Yeah. Shouts out to these people who became members. Let me make sure I'm still going here. Hold on a second, because that one closed out. Yeah, we're still going. Good. Okay, so shouts out to these people who got memberships tonight. Really appreciate y'all. Shouts out to Melly, High IQ Book Enjoyer. Shouts out to Crystalline, Slow Boy Whiteboard. Appreciate you. Shouts out to First Person Q, Itasca. What it says, Itasca. Shouts out to you. Thank you. High IQ Book Enjoyer Level. Shouts out to Keeks, Tommy Jones, Nathan Kurtz, Living the Dream, Melaforta, Jason, KF. Shouts out to the real John Connor, Leaves of Grass, Max O'Neill, Jethro. Y'all are the best. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for grabbing a membership. Really appreciate y'all. Look at that. Dang, that is awesome. Yo, that is sweet. That is sweet, y'all. And then let's see. Any super chat? Did we get any super chats? I don't think we got any super chats tonight. Did we get any super chats? Oh, I'm not sure. Let me know if I'm missing anybody, y'all. I don't think I'm missing anybody. Okay, so I'm gonna hold that one back. I'm gonna hold that next paper back. Thank you so much. Let me know if I missed anybody. Thank you to all those who gifted memberships. You guys are great. We're gonna do a members only stream soon, very soon. Please let me know in the comments afterwards, because I'm gonna listen to especially the members. Let me know what you want me to cover. Okay, if you want to support me, you can do that. You can do that easily through PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, are the most. Those get right to me. Those help me out a lot. I will be doing movie analysis and book analysis. I'll probably come back to this one from H.G. Wells in terms of that paper. And then I've got James Joyce coming up, right? I got Joyce coming up. Right. And I got to get a soundboard. Because I got these clips.
How dare you? How dare you?
Yo, listen to Michael Caine. Listen.
Let me explain the Texas accent to you. So he said, all the words lean on each other.
Michael Caine said, let me explain the Texas accent. All the words lean on each other. All right, you guys, that's about all I got for tonight. And listen, to play us out as usual, to play us out, right?
They call him the Bodhisattva. He's a real searcher.
What's he searching for?
The ride. The ultimate ride.
That's right. He's searching for the ride. So we're going to keep searching for the ultimate ride, y'all. Man, I'm tired. Oh, we got to get yes. All you do is blah, blah, blah. Thank you, Tommy Jones. Yeah, we got to do that. All you do is blah, blah, blah. With your dreams and your empty promises. We got to get Greta. You are absolutely right. So to play us out here, here's Rooks G, right? Our homeboy Rooks G. And here's Cyberliminal. Thank y'all. I appreciate you. I hope everybody has a great night. And I hope this H.G. Wells served you well. If you got any comments, leave them afterwards. Please like and share. And feel free to support me anytime. Write me an email, madmaximalism and 2x's at gmail.com. Thanks to all people out there, all the members, everybody holding it down, all the mods, Jethro and Jason and everybody. And I love y'all. And let's play this out. Here we go.